Two girls sat as captives in a stranger's carriage, and not knowing the final destination, vainly tried to guess the route. Her companion did not even hide her confusion, because she had no idea what awaited them ahead. A sudden sound made one of the prisoners shudder and remember the dragon, whom she somehow considered not an enemy, but a creature worthy of pity. Meanwhile, in the Tokyo district of Sujinami, an elderly martial arts master ordered his student to attack without hesitation. At the training ground, Ryoma faced off against an old man armed with a katana and honed his technique with every strike. The mentor promised to leave all his property to the student if he managed to kill him during the duel. Interested in such a bet, Ryoma asked again if he would really get all the old man's belongings. The old man just laughed, noticing how seriously the boy was set on stabbing his throat. Ryoma reminded him that it was the mentor who taught him not to spare the enemy in a real fight, and the old man confirmed. All his techniques were designed for instant killing. Their clashes were always supposed to last until the death of one of the fighters, although Ryoma did not understand where in modern Japan such brutal skills could be needed. Later, Asuka saw that the breakfast she had prepared had gone cold and realized the men had lost track of time again. Irritated, Ryoma assured that their training could not be called entertainment, which only further fueled Asuka's curiosity. When the boy awkwardly admitted that they had tried to kill each other, Asuka hit him on the head, taking those words as a clumsy joke. The grandfather laughed and remarked that the girl behaved like a caring wife. Blushing, Asuka denied any romantic relationship with Ryoma and was offended by the old man's mockery. But the mentor reminded her of her daily visits and breakfasts, then asked if she had a rival. Returning to the lesson, the old man warned Ryoma, when protecting someone important, a warrior had no right to pity the opponent. The mentor cautioned the student against overconfidence, but Ryoma did not allow himself to be underestimated, and Asuka decided not to interfere and went to school. At school, the student again invited Ryoma to the karate club, but he refused once more. Disappointed, the girl asked him to think about it some more, while classmates whispered about another attempt to recruit Mikashiba. One of the schoolboys was surprised by the refusal of an almost 2-meter-tall and excellently trained boy, who was good at karate, judo, and any other sport. Instead, Ryoma remembered his grandfather's rule: a warrior who went out to kill had to finish the fight. All the techniques of his mentor were designed for a deadly result with a single strike, so the ordinary school club became a dangerous place. Putting these thoughts aside, the boy remembered the lunch prepared by Asuka, although he still considered her care unnecessary. He could not join the section, as he was afraid of getting carried away by the duel and accidentally killing someone. The prospect of ending up in prison did not appeal to Ryoma either, but suddenly, a mysterious seal flared up right around him. The boy barely had time to come to his senses when he was transported to an unfamiliar place, where strangers examined him and declared the challenge successful. One of those present drew Gaius's attention to the powerful stature of the alien, but the mage ordered not to trust appearances and to immediately cast a curse. Ryoma feverishly assessed the situation, because the room did not resemble a school at all and gave no clue about his whereabouts. The strangers showed a clear intent to kill, so the boy refused futile negotiations and decided to take advantage of surprise. Recalling his grandfather's lesson about ruthlessness to the enemy, Ryoma suddenly spoke about a shared meal, hiding his readiness to strike first. This meeting did not end with a peaceful dinner. Instead, a brutal clash erupted. Having taken a sword from one attacker, Ryoma immediately discarded the unnecessary weapon and continued smashing opponents barehanded. The guards who fell under his blows realized too late how greatly they had underestimated the summoned alien. Seeing the helplessness of ordinary warriors, Gaius appealed to the spirits of thunder and wind, hoping to break Ryoma with their power. Instinct told the boy that the lightning magic could be deadly, so the situation sharply escalated. Having completed the spell, Gaius directed a storm lightning at the enemy, a pinpoint magical strike capable of hitting 1 or 2 targets. The mage already believed there would be no escape, but Ryoma at the last moment took the discharge of one of his subordinates. With the next strike, the boy damaged Gaius's right lung, depriving him of the ability to cast spells. Finally realizing that he had entered another world, Ryoma called for his grandfather, but of course, he heard no answer. Weakened, Gaius gathered his thoughts and informed that they were in the imperial palace of Ultomia, in the west of the central continent. The name explained nothing to the puzzled Ryoma, and the mage finally admitted that he himself had summoned the boy to this world. While the newcomer smiled mockingly, Gaius realized The stranger, without any experience in magic, predicted his spell and deliberately damaged his lung. Ryoma inquired about the way home, and Gaius immediately sensed in him the deadly determination of a true warrior. The mage wanted to use the newcomer to conquer the continent, but a deceitful promise of return would force him to act, and the truth could cost Gaius his life. Overcome with fear, the advisor, who was called the brain of Ultomia, refused to accept such a shameful death. The accelerated heartbeat betrayed the mage, and Ryoma pressed harder, already suspecting that there was no way back. Gaius confessed that he did not know a way to return the boy, but at the same time waited until the lung recovered and gave a chance to distract and kill him. Ryoma came to a grim conclusion. If the Empire only knew how to summon people, then from the very beginning it did not plan to leave them alive. Gaius explained that the aliens had enormous potential for absorption and could take the power of the killed opponents. While Ryoma tried to comprehend what he heard, Gaius saw in his confusion a chance to turn the situation around. The mage took up the spell again, but the boy struck before the last words of the formula were spoken. Wiping the blood from his hand, Ryoma accepted the fact of his transfer and thought that at least here earthly law would no longer judge his actions. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, a worried female voice sounded. 2 hours without any news convinced Celia that something bad had happened to her grandfather, but the guards reminded her, interfering in the most secret summoning ritual was forbidden. The commander of the guard, Rolf, tried to speak calmly and asked the girl to compose herself. But Celia could not suppress her anxiety, because even one mistake of her grandfather threatened catastrophic consequences. Rolf again urged her to calm down, because panic could no longer fix anything now. Realizing her own lack of restraint, the girl quickly apologized to the commander for her inappropriate behavior. To avoid increasing her embarrassment, Rolf took part of the blame on himself and acknowledged the natural worry of the granddaughter, bound to Gaius by blood. The barriers could no longer hold Celia. Reminding that even the strongest mages make mistakes, she addressed the spirit of flame. Noticing the spell preparation, Rolf ordered everyone to retreat, and at that moment a powerful stream of fire struck the massive steel doors. Even this flame barely damaged the barrier, so the commander decided that sheer force would not move it. Celia immediately changed her approach. After rapid heating, she froze the metal with frost, and the hardened doors shattered into pieces before the stunned guards. One of the warriors could not believe his eyes, and Rolf realized the precision of the calculation. The instant heating was followed by equally rapid cooling. The temperature change turned the strong steel into a brittle shell, and as soon as the path opened, the squad moved forward without hesitation. Celia ordered Rolf to go deeper and inspect the entire room as quickly as possible. The commander entered behind and was the first to see numerous bodies on the floor, at the sight of which he froze for a moment. One of the guards suddenly pointed to the depths of the hall, where Gaius lay. Seeing the old man in such a state, Celia froze, unable to believe the terrible scene before her. A thorough examination revealed a living wounded man who barely whispered about a monster, and then weakened again. Rolf immediately ordered the witness to be saved, and the guards prepared a stretcher and rushed to take him from the slaughter site. The warriors asked the man to remain silent and conserve his strength, assuring him that the doctors would not let him die. Thus began the story of the summoned stranger, who was destined to meet 2 maidservants and journey from obscurity to supreme power in a world of sword and magic. The leader of the imperial mages, Gaius, was considered a victim of a mysterious monster, and the killer's disappearance without a trace only deepened the anxiety. The autopsy showed that all the deceased were killed by an unarmed fighter who relied solely on his own hands. Rolf was stunned by the thought that the unknown bare-handed man had defeated not only the armored soldiers, but also the mighty Gaius. Such a result seemed so impossible to the commander that he could find no explanation for it. The guard's report only heightened the tension. Deep bruises remained on the bodies, resembling the marks of human fingers. Some victims were struck with such force that it was difficult to explain it by an ordinary human attack. Rolf recalled the words of the sole survivor and wondered whether he had called a creature summoned from another world a monster. However, aliens usually appeared weak, so the commander postponed conclusions until he could personally interrogate the witness. A sudden shout from one of the guards interrupted his thoughts. Rolf demanded explanations, but the embarrassed warrior only stammered and repeatedly mentioned the infirmary. At the site, they were met by a new disaster. The hospital building was completely engulfed in a raging fire that was already threatening to spread further. Far from panic, the carefree young man Orland stood among the flowers and inhaled their scent as if nothing unusual was happening around. Near the burning building, the guards were bustling and desperately demanding to bring water. It quickly became clear that ordinary buckets would not be enough to extinguish the fire, so the guards began calling for a mage. Orland responded to the call. Addressing the eternal spirit of water, he gave the stream the form of a dragon and unleashed a powerful aquastorm. As soon as the magic subdued the flames, Celia ran to the hospital and anxiously called Orland, who noticed Rolf nearby as well. The girl immediately demanded explanations, but Orland's calm answer about extinguishing the fire only irritated her with its obviousness. The mage agreed that what was said was insufficient, but Celia did not let him gather his thoughts and insisted on details. Orland had just arrived and did not yet know the reasons for the event himself, so the girl accepted his explanation and moved on to a more important question. Shortly before the fire started, a wounded soldier was brought to the hospital, and now it was necessary to find out his connection to the fire. The Imperial Doctor Ron Belt interrupted the conversation, confirming that this was the man admitted before the incident. In a heavy voice, the doctor warned of the extreme danger of the culprit, and then reported the death of Aaron. Even before the fire, the guards supported the wounded man who was conscious and convinced him to hold on until the doctor arrived. When the door opened, Ron Belt entrusted Aaron with the new patient, as he himself had to immediately attend to another matter. Stunned by this decision, Aaron tried to stop his father, but he had already left, leaving his son alone to deal with the wounded man. One of the guards dissatisfiedly attributed Ron's behavior to another drinking binge, but the girl present reminded them that young Aaron, despite his age, already had a good reputation among doctors. Despite the anxiety, Aaron dismissed doubts and focused on helping the seriously wounded man. But before anyone could carry out his orders, a sudden attack disrupted all actions and stunned the young doctor. Seeing no other way out, Aaron decided to call for help and hoped that they would manage to save him. Ryoma suddenly grabbed him, cutting off any possibility of retreat. Aaron irritably jerked his hand and demanded that the stranger let him go, but he did not relent and before leaving wanted to ask one question. The doctor barely restrained his outrage, and Ryoma calmly inquired how to get out of this place. Aaron's voice trembled from shock, but what tormented him most was something else: who this man was and why he had killed everyone in the hall. Ryoma briefly apologized for what he had done, but immediately returned to the route and insisted on a clear answer. Realizing his own helplessness, Aaron explained that they needed to turn right, cross the garden, and exit to the gate. The boy carefully repeated the route, and the stunned doctor weakly nodded to confirm the correctness of the direction. Satisfied with the answer, Ryoma apologized once again, after which he thoroughly searched the warehouse for everything necessary for the escape. Ron Belt concluded that the fugitive covered himself with fire and warned the rest. They must catch him immediately. Hearing this, the worried Orland demanded explanations, but Celia instead ordered him to prepare the spell. The mage was confused by such haste, while the girl was already sending Rolf straight to the royal guard. The commander accepted the order without unnecessary questions, and Orland's doubts disappeared as soon as he saw Celia's facial expression. Ron Belt calmly advised the mage not to argue and simply follow her instructions. Celia personally asked him for help, and after a short pause, Orland only clarified which part of his power he was allowed to use. Due to the exceptional danger of the enemy, the girl lifted all restrictions and even allowed the use of teleportation. Orland agreed and began a short spell, addressing the divine light for the speed of the very beam. Watching him, Ron enthusiastically noted that the third-rank mage was launching a complex teleportation with an unusually concise formula. Celia did not doubt Orlando's reliability, as he was her grandfather's personal student. She informed Rolf that she would transfer him directly to the barracks for soldier training, and the commander left the Emperor's permission to her. After that, Celia asked Ron to settle all matters after her departure, as she herself urgently needed to secure an audience with the ruler. Without wasting a moment, the sorceress summoned the almighty light and demanded a speed equal to its rays. Ron Belt meanwhile calmly finished his drink, as if the events around did not require his immediate intervention. The teleportation spell instantly transported Celia to the palace. The guard before the throne hall stunnedly raised weapons and warned that such a daring teleportation could cost her life. Despite the threats, Celia declared the extreme urgency of the matter and ordered an immediate report to the Emperor. Recognizing the sorceress, the guards hesitated and tried to find out what had happened. The girl interrupted them and threatened to blow down the throne hall doors with magic if her words were not immediately conveyed to the ruler. Not waiting for an answer, she decisively stepped over the threshold. Chancellor of Altomia Durnest turned to the uninvited guest and indignantly demanded an explanation for such disrespect to the emperor. He was irritated not only by the brazen invasion, but also by the absence of the head of the court mages, while only a second-rank sorceress stood before the throne. The first emperor of Altomia, Lionel Isengate, cut off the chancellor, unwilling to listen to further reproaches. The ruler noted that Celia would not resort to such extremes without a good reason and ordered Durnest to be silent. Realizing that the dispute was over, the chancellor hastily apologized and dared not object further. Then Lionel turned to Celia and officially allowed her to speak. Suppressing her excitement, the sorceress respectfully introduced herself and asked to be given command of the royal guard. Durnest was stunned by the sorceress's demand, but the emperor calmly agreed to consider it if Celia proved the necessity of such a step. Clenching her fists, the girl reported in a steady voice that her grandfather, the head of the court mages Gaius Valkland, had been killed. Meanwhile, Ryoma had already changed into the armor of an imperial guardsman. Examining the new equipment, he recalled the name of the slain Gaius and his contemptuous look. Not dwelling on the unpleasant memory, the boy left the room with feigned calm. On the way, Ryoma again replayed in his mind the first conversation with Gaius after the summons. Then he demanded an explanation as to why he was transferred to a world of swords and spears, which had long been abandoned on Earth. Gaius replied that people from Ryoma's homeland had a special ability and could become the most powerful warriors here. Each killing transferred part of the victim's strength to the victor, allowing them to grow relentlessly. What he heard made the boy ask again if he really absorbed the strength of 4 killed soldiers after the fight. The mage confirmed this but clarified the scale. The strength of one person was given by 1,000 human deaths or 100 defeated dragons. Ryoma thoughtfully repeated the number of dragons, and for the first time received a concrete benchmark for his own enhancement. Looking around, the boy became increasingly convinced that he had indeed ended up in a world with completely different laws. A little later, Ryoma was calmly having dinner in a city tavern, satisfied with the decision to throw the armor beyond the walls and lead the pursuers on a false trail. The money taken from the dead was enough for inconspicuous clothes, but the question of further actions still demanded an answer. While the young man was thinking, a female employee of the establishment approached him and, not recognizing a local, took him for a traveler. Ryoma looked surprised at the mug of beer in front of him because he had not ordered anything like that. The smiling woman explained that because of him, she had ended her break early and offered to drink together, at least as compensation. In his homeland, the boy was only 16, so the very thought of alcohol caused him tension. He awkwardly admitted his discomfort and thought that his too mature appearance did not allow anyone to suspect his real age. Not wanting to seem rude, Ryoma thanked for the treat, and the woman in response called him a good person. The young man did not understand such a conclusion, but the interlocutor explained, one who knows how to ask for forgiveness and thank already deserves kind words. Then she asked if it was his first time in the capital of Altomia, and Ryoma supported the invented role and said he had arrived after his parents died of illness. The woman's face softened, and she apologized for the painful question, but the boy quickly assured her that everything was fine. To change the subject, he shared his intention to settle in the city and inquired about the possibility of finding a decent job. Recalling his skill with a sword, Ryoma gave her a hint, but the woman immediately rejected blacksmithing, for the training of which he was already too old. Trade also required first becoming someone else's apprentice, and such dependence seemed not very attractive to the boy. Finally, the interlocutor found a simple solution. A skilled swordsman should choose the craft of a mercenary or an adventurer. The unfamiliar term surprised Ryoma, so he asked to explain who these adventurers were. The woman looked at him closely, not believing that the traveler had really never heard of them. The boy apologized for his ignorance and asked how to join this profession. The procedure turned out to be simple. Visit the bank and then register at the neighboring guild, where they didn't even require identity verification. Before returning to work, the woman invited him to come again, since in the evenings the establishment turned into a tavern and gathered guild members. Soon Ryoma was already standing at the counter of the Adventurers Guild, where the clerk greeted the new visitor. He asked to register him and to tell him about the available tasks, and the girl first demanded a bank card. Ryoma handed over the document without objection and only clarified if everything was all right with it. While checking the data, the clerk involuntarily was surprised by his 16 years, and the young man for the second time that day wearily heard the same question about his age. He assumed that he really looked much older, and the girl hurried to deny it and immediately apologized for the inappropriateness. Ryoma calmly assured that he was not offended, although his facial expression left her with some doubts. Returning to her duties, the clerk explained that the guild was a huge organization with branches all over the continent. Each registered member received a level, which determined physical strength, and a rank, which rose or fell according to achievements. In response to the question about absorption, Ryoma answered correctly. After killing a living creature, part of its power passed to the victor. All beginners started from 0 level, equal to an ordinary person, while the first already doubled their strength. The young man quickly grasped the pattern and clarified whether the 10th level of power corresponded to 10 people, and the attendant agreed only theoretically. In practice, no one except one person rose even above the 7th level by their own efforts, which immediately sparked Ryoma's curiosity. The girl refused to delve into unnecessary details for a novice and moved on to the system of assignments. For exterminating wild bees or wolves, they paid 3 copper coins per creature, and successful combat tasks gradually increased the rank. Listening to the explanation, Ryoma was already thinking about escape and asked if there were missions involving travel beyond the kingdom's borders. Such assignments existed, but were only available to adventurers of higher rank. With a starting rank of F, he could only reach neighboring towns, including escorting cargo. Checking the list, the attendant named 3 available directions: Garuik, Merfelin, and Oido. The wanted fugitive had to leave Ultimia as soon as possible, and the guild's offer gave him a great opportunity to disappear legally. The direct route south was too obvious, so Ryoma chose the eastern task to Merfelin. Later in the weapons shop, he carefully examined the shelves but did not see a single katana. In the absence of usual weapons, a scimitar or another long sword with a curved blade would have suited the boy. He was led to the shop by the advice of a tavern worker who belatedly remembered one more important thing. Upon learning that Ryoma considered his own fists as his only weapon, the woman disapprovingly shook her head. Most often, adventurers were killed not by large monsters from which one could flee, but by weaker creatures despised for their own carelessness. Her warning was born from the memory of a young, ambitious man who once promised to buy out the establishment and send the hostess into retirement. The unpredictability of the world made the woman seriously warn Ryoma once again about any surprises beyond the city walls. The boy heeded the advice and, already standing among the weapons, mentally acknowledged its soundness. He knew nothing about this world and could not afford overconfidence, so he politely asked the shopkeeper to select the appropriate weapon. The shopkeeper frowned at the request for a convenient weapon and threatened to throw the buyer out the door if he said something like that again. Ryoma quickly apologized and recalled the tavern hostess's recommendation, after which the master's attitude noticeably changed. Carefully examining the visitor, the man asked if he was really a newcomer, since his appearance hardly seemed youthful. The boy explained that he had registered only today and wearily thought about how many times he had already repeated this story, while the shopkeeper ordered him to wait. At first, the master once again forbade calling his weapon convenient or suitable, and then took a dagger from under the counter and asked to evaluate the work. Ryoma carefully examined the blade, immediately noticed a special forging method, and confirmed his guess with the shopkeeper. The cheap-looking dagger, thanks to this technology, had almost unbreakable strength, and the quick understanding of the detail pleasantly surprised the master. Acknowledging the sharp eye of the buyer, the man listened to his request for a one-handed sword with a curved blade, while Ryoma was surprised by being addressed as a young man. The shopkeeper immediately guessed about a katana from another world, instantly attracting the boy's full attention. However, he did not have a katana, nor did he know the secret of their manufacture, and the usual local blades apparently did not suit Ryoma. Weighing the possibilities, the master invited the visitor to the inner room with a collection of weapons from other worlds. First, he showed an Okinawan tonfa, which was considered imported from China, and then a 3-section staff capable of folding into a solid handle. Next appeared nunchaku, effective with Filipino techniques, and sai, suitable simultaneously for strikes and defense. Noticing the guest's pensiveness, the shopkeeper asked with a slight smile about his skills, and Ryoma confidently replied that he knew a little about each of these types of weapons. The collection was supplemented by a short throwing kabasi, an ancient Indian chakram, and a movable folding staff with adjustable length. Taking the tonfa in his hands, Ryoma performed several moves and clearly demonstrated that he really knew how to use it. The master acknowledged his skill, but the boy himself shook his head after a brief trial and refused the choice. Knowledge of techniques did not help Ryoma feel the true benefit of this weapon in the future battle. He recalled training with his grandfather and the Rikigusari weapon, which strengthened his confidence in his ability to master the proper alternative. Moving on to the throwing samples, the boy carefully inspected them and eventually chose 2 items. He added a sword to the purchase, thanked for the collection demonstration, and left with the intention to get used to the new blade as soon as possible. Later, Ryoma returned to the tavern, where a familiar employee was already waiting for him. The woman inquired about his progress, and the boy showed with a restrained shrug that he had managed. Satisfied with the answer, she immediately asked about the assignment from the guild. Ryoma did not understand which document was meant and learned that the letter with the task was a mandatory part of the mission. Reviewing the day's events, the young man admitted that he did not have the letter and could not understand how he missed such an important thing. Another visitor overheard the conversation, immediately recognized the newcomer, and the woman confirmed that he simply forgot to take the document. The man called it a typical mistake and advised to return for the letter the next day without unnecessary worry. A little embarrassed, Ryoma thanked for the hint, but the interlocutor waved off such a trifle. Suddenly, he loudly introduced the boy to the entire tavern and suggested to drink to his admission to the guild, urging the rest to friendly accept the newcomer. Already in bed, Ryoma felt a certain stability for the first time, because at least now he had a safe place to spend the night. A quick change of clothes saved him from a squad of pursuers who passed very close and noticed nothing. Temporary luck did not allow him to relax, as the hunt for him was only beginning. Rolf demanded special attention, an experienced warrior whose abilities were dangerous to underestimate. Celia also had considerable strength, but the greatest threat, in Ryoma's opinion, was posed by another woman. He saw her only for a moment, but one brief encounter sent chills down his spine and left a feeling of hidden danger. If the pursuers were chess pieces, this stranger would undoubtedly be their queen. Meanwhile, the first princess of Altomia, Shardana Isengate, personally led the search for the fugitive. Sato doubted that they would find a person whose face none of them even knew. He cautiously suggested the presence of special information, but Shardana confidently stated that she would manage even without a portrait. Ignorance of the appearance would not prevent the princess from recognizing the killer as soon as he stood before her. Celia did not understand why the pursuit had not yet begun and demanded an explanation for the delay. Shardana considered the night search too dangerous and wanted to return first, prepare countermeasures, and make a plan for the morning. Celia objected that such caution would give the criminal enough time to escape. Without continuing the argument, the princess ordered Orlando to take the mage, and he obeyed without hesitation. Orlando picked up Celia in his arms and carried her away, despite her indignant demands to put her down immediately. When they left, Rolf asked Shardana where the squads would go the next day. The princess chose the eastern direction for herself and ordered the rest of the forces to be sent south. The commander reminded that the southern border was the most obvious escape route from the empire, and therefore doubted her choice. Shardana acknowledged the proximity of the southern border, but a strange premonition stubbornly pulled her eastward. Shardana saw many reasons to flee east, and trusting her own premonition, decided to personally check that direction. She calmly entrusted the southern pursuit to her comrades, as she already had a capable and reliable assistant nearby. Rolf remembered the newcomer from the continent, Rurd Sato, and the princess confirmed that from now on he would be the one helping her in the search. The proposal to mobilize the garrison of Adelpho Chardon was rejected. It could have provoked an attack by Zaryuda, while support from the nobility could not be counted on. After the death of Gaius, the empire was still lucky to avoid a noble revolt, so Rolf agreed that their fragile position left no safer choice. While the pursuers were making plans, Ryoma was already fighting wild beasts far from the capital. The continuous hunting simultaneously provided him with food and turned into exhausting training. After finishing the fight, the boy carried the prey to the guild branch in Merfelin, located 10 kilometers east of the capital. The clerk was stunned to count among his trophies 54 wild dogs, 31 bees, and 39 rabbits. Ryoma noted that the sword he had bought only yesterday was already dulled from such exertion and now needed sharpening. The girl could not believe that he had killed all the creatures with a single blade, but the newcomer's calm confirmation left no doubts. His result resembled the work of a destruction mage or a bearer of a special ability, so the clerk involuntarily admired the unknown talent. For all the prey, Ryoma received 4 silver and 31 copper coins, which by his calculations amounted to approximately 43,000 yen. The earnings turned out to be worthy, and the guild employee added an unexpected piece of news about a promotion to rank E. The restrained reaction of the boy made her think that he was not pleased, although Ryoma himself simply did not immediately believe in such rapid progress. The newcomer explained his silence by complete surprise and even suspicion that they were joking about him. The girl called it a typical reaction of gifted people and informed that from now on all his rewards would be doubled. The new opportunities impressed Ryoma, although the attendant emphasized, double pay did not change the true value of his achievements. The calculations showed that now he could earn about 100,000 yen per day, a huge amount for him. Along with excitement returned the tavern mistress's warning about adventurers, who were most often lost due to their own carelessness. Realizing the price of overconfidence, Ryoma decided to prepare better and asked the worker about healing potions. Magical medicines were sold only for gold, and one high-quality elixir cost as much as 10 gold coins. By earthly standards, this amounted to almost 1,000,000 yen, and such a price stunned the boy. Without accessible treatment, any serious wound in this world effectively became a death sentence. The lack of insurance made every fight even more risky, so Ryoma at least decided to buy a spare sword. Nearby, a quarrel broke out in the guild. The enraged Horace demanded a reward for the task for which he risked his life. The guild representative calmly explained that, despite being a first-rank swordsman, Horace had only the 3rd level among adventurers. He really defeated a bandit, but that one did not belong to the Red Moon gang mentioned in the assignment. While Horace was wasting time on the wrong target, the real bandits attacked a neighboring village and kidnapped many girls. The fighter realized that by his mistake, he allowed the tragedy to happen, and the kidnapped were soon to be sold to slave traders. Without seeking excuses, Horace admitted guilt and asked to deduct the appropriate fine from his account. The official noted that such things happened often, and Ryoma clarified whether it was about failed assignments. Horace was a good mercenary, but he neglected the investigation, without which an adventurer could not properly identify the target. The employee emphasized, the success or failure of a mission usually changed the fates of many people, not just the executor's wallet. Continuing down the road, Ryoma seriously pondered her words and admitted that, until now, he had treated assignments too superficially. Unlike a game, each mission here directly affected the life of the person who asked the guild for help. Continuing eastward, the boy gradually approached the city of Enro. However, there were no bandits around, although logic suggested that it was precisely in these places that they should be operating. Meanwhile, in the Red Moon's hideout, the robbers loudly celebrated a successful day and boasted about the unprecedented revival of their affairs. The attack on the village brought them loot worth at least 500 gold coins, surpassing even the boldest expectations. One of the bandits wanted to have fun with the captives before selling them, but a comrade reminded him of the inevitable punishment from the leader. He dismissed the threat with a simple plan. After the abuse, kill the girls and forever hide the truth from the chief. The robbers mocked the captive's master, who mercilessly abandoned them and fled, saving only himself. In their opinion, the man had no other choice, since an encounter with the Red Moon almost always meant death. One of the captives gathered her courage and threatened to bite off the tongue if anyone tried to touch her or her friend. The robbers burst out laughing, not taking her determination seriously at all. The slave collars did not allow the girls to kill themselves or raise a hand against their enslavers, so the threat seemed futile. One man chose the blonde, and then intended to take the silver-haired captive as well. He ordered the rest to guard the exit and not allow any captive to escape. But the bandit did not manage to carry out the plan. His life was suddenly cut short. Just out of nowhere, Ryoma appeared, and without hesitation killed the bandit, who was already reaching out to the captives. The rest of the robbers flinched at the noise and fiercely turned to the brave one, who dared to challenge the Red Moon. Without answering, the boy demonstratively stuck his sword into the ground in front of him. Then he slowly moved forward, and the confidence of each step made the bandits tense in anticipation of an unknown attack. In a moment, Ryoma was already engaged in battle with them. The enemies fell one by one, not getting a single chance to turn the fight around. The boy fought mercilessly and left no hope for mercy to the bandits. Two captives watched in shock as the stranger single-handedly destroyed their kidnappers. Having made sure the danger had passed, Ryoma finally returned to the girls and checked their condition. One of the captives noticed blood on him and anxiously apologized for the wound caused because of them. Seeing her concern, the boy quickly assured that he felt fine and did not need serious help. The older sister introduced herself as Laura, and the younger one named herself Sarah. Looking more closely at the identical features, Ryoma realized that the rescued girls were twins. Their appearance still troubled him, so the young man checked again whether they were really unharmed. Laura confirmed that both were intact and sincerely thanked the rescuer for his timely appearance. Ryoma did not want to accept gratitude because he had deliberately waited for the best moment to attack instead of rushing to help immediately. His silent observation lulled the bandits' vigilance, but during this time, the sisters were one step away from violation. Without seeking excuses, the boy admitted that it was his hesitation that made them endure painful humiliation. Despite this confession, Sarah calmly assured that she held no grudge against him. Laura supported her sister and emphasized that they even lacked words to fully express their gratitude for the rescue. Ryoma reluctantly accepted their thanks, although he still doubted whether he truly deserved it. The clothing resembling that of Arab dancers attracted attention, but the collars and shackles on the sisters' bodies proved far more important. These signs made the boy ask about their family name, but Laura unemotionally explained that slaves did not have surnames. Ryoma immediately realized the inappropriateness of the question and awkwardly apologized for his indiscretion. In response, Laura inquired about the rescuer's name, and he finally fully introduced himself as Ryoma Mikashiba. Then the boy offered to escort the sisters to Enro, hoping to leave them in a safe city. Confused, Sarah replied that without the master's permission, they could not leave this place at all. Ryoma at first did not believe the seriousness of these words, but a repeated explanation forced him to accept the strange reality. Free will meant nothing for the slaves, and the unexpected obstacle completely changed the simple rescue plan. To find a way out, the young man decided first of all to find out where their master was. Sarah explained that the owner fled together with the guards when the bandits appeared and left both girls to their fate. What was heard left no doubt. The man simply abandoned his slaves for his own salvation. Laura silently confirmed this with a nod, but the sisters still stood in place and did not even try to escape. Without the master's order, they could not move, and Ryoma did not believe that foreign authority could so tightly bind a person. The empire still pursued him, so he did not want to get bogged down in new problems and only sought to deliver the girls to the city. Slave restrictions destroyed this intention, leaving the boy only a few available ways to help. By darkness, monsters could appear, so Ryoma decided at least to clear the bodies and prepare a safer place. Laura listened to him attentively and thanked him again for his care. The boy himself painfully understood that his abilities were limited and he could not fix all the evil around. For a moment, Ryoma even felt like a hypocrite who pretended nobility, although in reality, he was little different from the rest. Suddenly, the surviving bandit grabbed Sarah and, mocking, promised to find Ryoma by the remembered face, no matter where he hid. Laura called her sister in panic, and the captive Sarah responded with the same desperate scream. The girl's very clear voice made the boy tense. The enemy he thought was dead not only survived, but also escaped the trap. On the ground remained a familiar vial of extremely expensive healing potion. The elixir really saved the bandit and gave him such speed that Ryoma could not imagine how to catch the kidnapper. Without wasting time, the young man turned to Laura, and she immediately focused on his words. First of all, he wanted to know if Sarah's life was in danger, but the sister quickly assured that she remained alive. Calming down a bit, Ryoma promised to find a way out, and Laura in response asked him for one strange favor. The girl wanted him to make a small cut on the ring finger of his left hand. The boy did not understand the meaning of the request, but Laura emphasized the lack of time and asked to act immediately. Not wanting to waste precious seconds, Ryoma agreed and made a cut on the finger. After making sure he had fulfilled the request, Laura made the same cut on her own hand. A strange premonition intensified, because since the first meeting, these girls did not seem like ordinary slaves at all. Without wasting time, Laura addressed the god Harvey and swore to give her body, heart, and soul to the new master. Only now did Ryoma finally realize that the girl was conducting a real prayer ritual. Continuing the rite, she asked to accept the bloody sacrifice and seal the concluded contract. The chains that had still bound her movements suddenly lost their power and fell from her hands. Laura declared the ritual complete and asked the new master to forgive the unauthorized use of force. Not fully understanding the consequences, Ryoma simply nodded, allowing her to act. The girl immediately summoned the spirit of the changing winds and ordered the elements to cut down the enemy. Ryoma recognized the moment of attack when Laura called the technique wind slash. The kidnapper was stunned to realize that before him was not a helpless slave but a mage, while Sarah anxiously called her sister. The familiar spell returned the boy to the fight in the palace, where the old Gaius used the same magic. The second wind slash wounded the escapee's horse and sharply slowed its movement. Seizing the advantage, Laura suggested to the master to immediately return Sarah. But the kidnapper was already several kilometers away, and even running would take Ryoma too much time. Laura did not hesitate and asked the shifting wind to grant her the speed of the very element. As soon as the spell ended, a swift air current swirled around the girl. She warned that she was leaving and disappeared from the spot before Ryoma could stop her. The young man did not even finish speaking when he realized that without magical acceleration, his part in the chase was over. Laura instantly caught up with the kidnapper, and Sarah joyfully called her sister. Watching from afar, Ryoma could not believe that a person could cover such a distance in an instant. What was seen was obvious wind magic, and Laura asked in surprise if he had never heard of it. The boy could not admit to complete ignorance without risking exposing himself, but he felt that the girl already suspected something. Laura was also surprised how such a skilled fighter could not know the simplest principles of magic. Silent suspicions were interrupted by a new shout from Sarah. The sister immediately checked her condition, and the captive assured that she had not resisted and therefore had no injuries. The horse fell right on the bandit and pinned his legs, so all desperate orders to get up no longer changed anything. Sarah asked what to do with the helpless enemy, and Laura suggested leaving the decision to their master. Ryoma asked again whom she meant, and heard the expected confirmation of his new role. Accepting responsibility, the young man agreed to decide the fate of the prisoner himself. He immediately drew his sword, and the bandit panicked and began demanding that the stranger not come closer. Trying to save himself with threats, the man claimed that the Red Moon numbered over 100 people. Moreover, the gang supposedly belonged to Zaryuta's army, so its enemy would bring the wrath of the entire state upon himself. Ryoma was only amused by these words. The death of a robber would not allow anyone to find out who exactly killed him. The dead would not pass any information to comrades, so the boy was not going to leave a dangerous witness alive. Seeing the futility of intimidation, the bandit changed tactics and began to beg for mercy, mentioning his own daughter. Laura calmly asked if Ryoma was sure about his decision, but he saw no problem in it. The girl was only interested in whether it was possible to first extract useful information from the captive. The boy doubted the usefulness of interrogation, since they did not even know where the truth was in the criminal's words. Blindly trusting the robber made no sense, and the most important result for Ryoma remained the successful return of Sarah. Laura addressed him again as her master. She explained that after the bloody oath, she was obliged to call him that way. Ryoma clarified whether it was about the moment when they cut the ring fingers and mixed blood. Laura confirmed the guess, and Sarah immediately asked to perform the same ritual with her. The elder sister supported the request and pleaded insistently that the master take the second bloody oath. The completely confused boy asked for a short pause to gather his thoughts. Having composed himself, he explained to Laura that he did not need her slavish service. The faces of the twins changed instantly, and Ryoma had to assure them that this refusal did not mean hatred. Laura's doubts did not disappear, so she directly asked to name the real reason. Maintaining clarity of thought, Ryoma did not immediately refuse the ritual, and reminded that the girls supposedly had to wait for the former owner. Laura explained that the bloody oath canceled his orders, but Sarah was still under the effect of the old curse and could not leave on her own. The solution became obvious. The second ritual would free the younger sister and allow everyone to head to the city. Realizing the futility of the argument, the boy reluctantly agreed and suggested finishing the procedure as soon as possible. Instead, in Enro, the twins were supposed to explain everything, and the immediate departure still allowed reaching the city before dark. Sarah promised to tell the whole truth at the first suitable opportunity. Having agreed, Ryoma suggested first returning to the carriage to take the luggage and all valuable things. Near the wagon, he immediately noticed an unfamiliar man who was already waiting nearby. Seeing the girls alive, the fat man did not hide his surprise. At first, the man anxiously checked whether the bandits had harmed them. The feigned concern quickly turned into a rude question about abuse, and the real reason for his anxiety became obvious. He had been raising slaves for 5 years, and now complained that violence might have lowered their selling price. Unable to endure such treatment, Laura struck his hand with disgust. The sudden rebuff drew a surprised exclamation from the fat man. The girl coldly ordered him not to come closer and threatened to stab him with her sword. The enraged man called the sisters common things and could not believe that his own property had turned weapons against him. Watching the scene, Ryoma sarcastically asked if this fat man was their master, and Laura confirmed the guess. To the next question, she named the former owner as an enemy without hesitation, which was enough for the boy. Losing control, the slave trader tried to mock the giant and accused him of excessive heroism. He had already evaluated Ryoma's mighty body as a profitable commodity for a new sale. The boy did not continue listening and delivered the first blow. Laura and Sarah joined him and simultaneously plunged their swords into the body of their oppressor. After the massacre, Ryoma had many questions, but he decided to postpone the conversation until arrival in Enro. Laura agreed, understanding how much they still had to explain to each other. On the way, the boy thought about how a simple desire to save two people had quietly drawn him into a serious story. Already in Enro, the sisters washed up, after which Laura approached and apologized for the wait. Ryoma suggested discussing everything over dinner and asked the girls not to stand like statues, but to sit at the table. Laura refused, saying that slaves supposedly did not have the right to eat next to the master. Their appearance embarrassed the boy, and he first ordered both to dress properly. Then Ryoma again commanded to quickly take their seats while the dinner was still waiting on the table. The elder sister insisted that they would eat later, as they were forbidden to sit with the owner. The remark about cold food did not help. Sarah calmly explained that slaves were never given hot dishes at all. In the twins' eyes, Ryoma saw a familiar submissiveness that he had already encountered in similar circumstances. Then he clarified whether they had always obeyed the master's orders, and after confirmation, reminded them who now held this power. Sarah was forced to agree that the will of the new master left them no choice. Even a simple dinner was filled with awkward tension due to their slave-like behavior. Ryoma returned to the main question and clarified whether the bloody oath had truly made him the legitimate owner of their fate. Laura confirmed that the magical contract had sealed the relationship between the master and the slave girls. Moreover, from now on the sisters became his battle slaves, bound not only formally, but also by the duties of the oath. The unfamiliar term required explanation. Besides workers for physical labor, there were also specially trained slaves for battles. Their significant strength was usually sealed, so that battle slaves could not rebel or attack the owner without permission. Ryoma did not understand how the merchant's subordinate sisters independently changed the master, since such a possibility made all control meaningless. Sarah wanted to respond, but hesitated due to inner fear, and Laura calmly took the explanation upon herself. Before revealing the truth, the elder sister asked to keep what was heard a secret, and the boy promised to remain silent without objection. The girl's real surname was Malfist, and their family once belonged to the senior knights of the Kingdom of Quift on the western coast of the central continent. Repeating Laura Malfist's full name, Ryoma realized that before him stood the descendants of a respected noble family. 5 years ago, the dispute between Quift and the neighboring Shadora over tariffs and trade escalated into a war. The Chancellor's betrayal destroyed the state from within, forcing the family to flee disguised as a cargo ship. Listening carefully, the boy already guessed that even all these precautions did not save the fugitives. The longtime guard betrayed the sisters' trust and sold them to the slave trader Azos, completing the family's downfall with captivity and slavery. Sarah bitterly acknowledged the power of human greed, and Ryoma understood that the man met near the carriage, Azos, was the slave trader who bought the sisters. It was from him that the twins learned about war slaves, while the ritual of the bloody oath was taught to them in advance by their wise father. The head of the Malfist family probably left this right to the daughters, as the last chance to influence their own fate if they ever fell into slavery. Laura confirmed that the sisters had long waited for a trustworthy person, but Ryoma did not understand why they chose him specifically. The answer was simple: he protected them, although he had no reason to interfere in someone else's trouble. Understanding the twins' feelings, Ryoma declared them free, gave the money to Azos, and offered to start a new life without the burden of the past. Sarah refused to go, and Laura reminded that he had saved not only their lives, but also the honor of the family. for which they were ready to repay even with their own death. The boy pondered because his own circumstances required him to continue the journey alone. Laura asked for permission to ask an important question, and Ryoma agreed to listen to her. The girl suggested that the master was burdened by a serious secret directly related to his origin from another world. The overly skilled fighter knew nothing about magic or bloody oaths, and such a contradiction had long aroused suspicion. Ryoma admitted the truth. He was summoned by the imperial mage Gaius, and since then he had been hiding from pursuers. An unknown face to the enemies gave an advantage, while 2 slaves would only slow down the escape he sought. If the empire traced their path, the sisters would also become targets, so the boy offered them to choose their future independently. Understanding the master's unwavering desire to free them, Laura and Sarah agreed to submit to his will. Ryoma reminded that he would return to his native world someday, so their paths had to part in any case. Laura asked to stay close at least until this goal was achieved, and Sarah suddenly offered to take them with him to Earth. The unexpected thought initially stunned the elder sister, but quickly seemed to her a wonderful solution. Sarah enthusiastically supported her own plan, considering it the best solution for all 3. Confused, Ryoma tried to stop the discussion, which had rapidly gone too far. At that moment, his consciousness blurred, and the boy suddenly found himself in a completely different place. Waking up, Ryoma realized that the previous scene was just a dream. Traveling with the sisters could complicate the search for the way home, but the 2 companions helped avoid attracting unnecessary attention. Before continuing the route, the boy decided to exchange all the captured valuables. The shop assistant appraised the brought items and offered 3,000 gold coins for them. Impressed, Ryoma did not immediately respond, and the woman explained that this was their highest price for selling the entire set together. The boy assured that he simply did not expect such an amount, after which the saleswoman promised to transfer the money immediately. Her smile left a suspicion that the deal might have been unprofitable, but it was already too late to change the decision. Returning to the inn, Ryoma gave Laura and Sarah 2 rings, which he had kept before selling the rest of the jewelry. Instead of relief, the situation for the trio was becoming increasingly difficult. The closed border ruined the escape plan, and Sarah brought even worse news from the guild. Princess Shardana had personally arrived in the city. An ordinary blockade could have been overcome with a bribe, but the presence of the princess blocked this path, and a forceful breakthrough meant suicide. Laura added that such an attack would officially turn them into state traitors. Ryoma realized that Shardana had come specifically for him, but his sister assured him the responsibility for the imperial hunt did not lie with him. The threat required extreme caution, so the boy unfolded the map and began looking for a new route. The eastern border was completely blocked, leaving only the northern forest, where the enemies could quite predict their appearance. Putting himself in the pursuer's place, Ryoma understood the obviousness of the ambush and unexpectedly turned this danger into the basis of the plan. The trio was to go through the northern forest not to escape, but to swap the hunters and the prey. In another camp, Sato came to the same conclusion. The closed eastern border would inevitably push the fugitive into the forest. He suggested setting a trap there, although the lack of any description of the suspect significantly complicated the search. Shardana did not need a face. She had a way to identify an otherworldly visitor by the words he would personally utter. In the northern border forest, Ryoma was meanwhile resting by the fire after a long journey. The silence of the night forest was suddenly broken by footsteps that were steadily approaching the camp. From the darkness came Sato and immediately tried to ease the tension, assuring that there were no hostile intentions. The stranger called himself not a bandit, apologized for the fright, and asked for permission to sit by the fire. Ryoma coldly remarked that he had not given such permission, but Sato kept the conversation going with praise for the smell of the food and a question about the solitary traveler's occupation. Not wishing to reveal too much, the boy only mentioned the closed border beyond Arrow. Due to the unknown duration of the blockade, he supposedly decided to cross the forest, but categorically refused to share dinner. Disappointed, Sato nevertheless warned about wild dogs and possible pursuit, which made the solitary journey especially dangerous. Ryoma noticed that the interlocutor had come alone without escort and directly asked who he really was. The stranger introduced himself as Sato Hidaki, deputy commander of the Knights of Tsukuba of the Ultomi Empire. After thinking a little, Ryoma unexpectedly offered him part of the dinner. Grateful, Sato accepted the food and admitted that he was in the forest not by accident. He was looking for an unknown fugitive and asked Ryoma to go to the imperial camp without unnecessary questions. Soon Sato reported to Shardini about the prisoner who had the same alien smell from another world. The princess approved the deputy's work and wanted to personally check the suspect. Returning, Sato informed Ryoma about the commander's desire to meet him. The boy agreed but called the shackles excessive and heard that they would be removed only after the truth was clarified. Shardina politely thanked the captive for his time on behalf of the empire. Only then did Ryoma realize that the very first princess was standing before him. Shardina confirmed her title and expressed regret over the circumstances of their meeting. The young man assured that he was not offended because crossing the closed border through the forest could indeed arouse suspicion. The princess laughed. He was detained not because of the route, but because they recognized the wanted alien. Ryoma tried to feign ignorance, but Shardina immediately called the objections futile. Sato explained the mistake. After the extremely official address of a person of royal blood, the boy responded quite casually. A local resident before the princess would have fallen to the ground, as the royal family here was revered almost like gods. Realizing his own mistake, Ryoma calmly accepted the exposure and upon request gave his name. The surname Mikashiba immediately suggested to Sato that the prisoner was Japanese. Ryoma also recognized his compatriot and respectfully addressed him with a Japanese suffix. Sato confirmed the suspicion and said that he had been summoned to this world 10 years ago. Shardina interrupted the acquaintance and ordered Mikashiba to be returned to the capital, where his fate would be finally decided. The prisoner only sarcastically thanked, while the princess called his escape a disgrace for the imperial summoners. To the proposal to help Ultimia unite the lands, Ryoma responded with contempt, although Shardina insisted on the summoned one's duty to obey. Sato knew that such obedience was not unconditional, but he was much more disturbed by the prisoner's strange calm. Even without imperial scouts, there were enough guards, but the deputy was not relieved of a bad premonition. Contrary to the order to deliver the prisoner alive, Sato apologized and declared that Ryoma must be killed immediately. Shardina, stunned, ordered to stop when the subordinate drew his sword without permission. Sato agreed to accept any punishment, but only after the execution of the dangerous compatriot. Before dying, he allowed Ryoma to say the last words as a person from the same country. Sato saw the indifferent refusal to speak as a display of courage, but Ryoma coldly explained that he did not need bravery because it was his enemies who were supposed to die here. At that very moment, Sarah summoned the shifting winds and directed the wind slash at the Imperials. Sato instinctively covered Shardina, who remained unharmed but did not understand the source of the attack. The magical strike stunned the warrior and confirmed that the trap had turned against them. Ryoma thanked Sarah for her timely appearance, and the girl saw with relief that her master was unharmed. The precision of the spell impressed the boy, as the ally attacked the enemies and did not touch him even once. Sarah explained that the bloody oath simply did not allow the slave to harm her own master. The very word slave made Sato realize how much more complicated this situation was. Ryoma immediately asked about Laura and learned that his sister was finishing the fight with the rest of the squad. In a moment, Laura had already returned, reporting about the destroyed soldiers who were unprepared for the magical attack. Sato could not believe that the battle slave girls simultaneously possessed exceptional skills and magic. There were so few mages in this world that service to the Empire automatically granted everyone a knightly title. One capable sorceress could equal an entire army, and before the Imperials stood two at once. Completely bewildered, Shardina asked in a trembling voice who these girls were. The sisters simultaneously declared that they belonged to the master and considered every one of his enemies their own. The princess did not understand why such talented warriors voluntarily served this man. When she addressed Sato, Ryoma mockingly warned that it was already too late to escape. Laura even suggested gaining fame by killing a representative of the imperial family. Sato did not know if he was capable of winning and thought only about protecting Shardina. Assessing the consequences, Ryoma finally ordered the sisters to stop. Ryoma initially wanted to kill the enemies, but their experience made even a 3-2 advantage unreliable. Any surprise could cost one of the sisters her life, and he directly asked if they were ready to serve him at such a price. Boundless devotion did not give the master the right to accept their sacrifice, while Sato was also only protecting his princess. Ryoma did not want anyone's death, and after these words, Chardonna finally ordered the deputy to lower his sword. Thanking for the understanding, the boy led the sisters away, but Sato stopped him with one last question. The deputy wanted to know if Ryoma was a member of the Japanese mafia. The outraged youth called himself an ordinary schoolboy and wearily repeated that he was only 16. Sato did not understand how someone from peaceful Japan could kill so easily. Even Chardonna was surprised by the unexpected direction of the conversation. Ryoma calmly asked since when a person lost the right to defend themselves from those who sought their death. He himself never attacked first, but responded to an enemy's strike without any restrictions. The boy only entered a fight when he was firmly ready to kill the opponent. Realizing the inappropriateness of the dispute, Ryoma ordered to move on, and Laura followed. Chardonna threw them a promise to unite the entire continent, after which the fugitives supposedly would have nowhere to hide. The boy only smiled and reminded about the possibility of returning to his own world. The further path led the trio to the Dashid Desert. Having reached the goal, Laura suggested heading to the trading zone near the oasis, where many people always gather. There they hoped to buy supplies and find a way to Earth, but Laura's sudden warning cut off the conversation. Just before the travelers, a monster emerged from the sand, forcing Ryoma to instantly turn around. The sandworm exposed its back too openly, as if deliberately inviting a careless attack. Sarah wanted to act, but the master ordered not to move, suspecting a trap. The feigned vulnerability allowed the worm to dodge and counterattack in a favorable location, so Ryoma decided to first lull its vigilance. The method of attack proposed to the sisters surprised Sarah with its unusualness. The worm's special vision did not matter for the plan, whose effectiveness increased with the number of participants and carried almost no risk. After the joint attack, the uncertain Sarah turned to the master, and Laura asked him specifically to deliver the final blow. Ryoma saw no sense in this, until his sister reminded him of the alien's ability to absorb the mana of a killed creature. The boy clarified whether people from other worlds could really take especially large amounts of power, and received confirmation. The rules reminded him of a game where the final blow to a weakened monster brought the main reward for victory. After 2 months in the oasis city of Maras in the kingdom of Hell Nestula, Ryoma again focused on the main goal, returning to Tokyo. The high-ranking mage Anamaria flatly stated that the roads to Earth did not exist. After an exhausting crossing of the desert, the boy indignantly reminded that it was she who was considered the person capable of helping. Anamaria explained the existence of only 3 types of magic: combat, verbal, and enchantment magic. Combat magic without spells enhanced physical abilities, but acted exclusively on the sorcerer himself. Verbal magic required a formula and transferred mana to gods, demons, or spirits for the sake of a supernatural phenomenon. Enchantment magic embedded a seal into a weapon, through which it absorbed the owner's power. Summoning belonged to verbal magic because the sorcerer gave mana to a certain deity. Transporting a person here was easy thanks to a known power recipient, but the return faced a completely different problem. For the reverse transition, permission from the god of the native world and a mana sacrifice to him were required. Ryoma saw a way out in searching for the name of this deity, and Anamaria agreed with the logic. Under such conditions, the boy still believed that he could return. He remembered the names Tsukuyomi, Suzuno, Amaterasu, Izanagi, and Izanami, and if needed, could ask other Japanese people. Old records about summoned people could also contain a clue and increase the chance of success. The sorceress took out a book with stories of aliens who had already tried to find their way home. She assumed that Ryoma's source of hope knew about the existence of this manuscript precisely in her hands. Laura guessed that all the recorded divine names had already been tried without result. Anamaria confirmed the book had been supplemented and verified over several hundred years. The scale of futile attempts stunned Ryoma, who did not want to accept hopelessness as reality. But the sorceress called it the unchanging truth of their world. The only consolation remained that, unlike many summoned, Ryoma still controlled his own life. Later, Laura reminded Sarah how their master had saved both from slavery. Sarah recalled the master's composure before Chardonna and did not understand why now the truth had driven him to rage. Laura called Ryoma a good person, although her sister doubted, looking at his current state. The cause of the anger was not the lost way home, but the fate of compatriots who had been turned into slaves for centuries. Laura asked Sarah to imagine her own forced enslavement. The younger sister replied that she would kill every offender of Laura and return her at any cost. The elder laughed at the literalness of the answer, but admitted it was essentially correct. Strong warrior slave women could still defend themselves, while those unable to fight, the summoned people, were deprived of even that chance. Ryoma experienced the rage of all these victims, and the sisters feared it could burn the whole world. For 2 days he had not responded, eaten, or left the locked room. Meanwhile, the boy found himself in an unfamiliar space and did not understand where he was. An invisible voice called to awaken rage, and called itself a being who understood Ryoma better than anyone. When asked about his true desire, the boy answered that he wished to return to his grandfather in Asuka. The voice acknowledged such a chance as possible, but demanded proper sacrifices and determination. When Ryoma accused Gaius, the interlocutor ordered to search deeper and identify the real culprit. In his opinion, the world itself was distorted, whose creator sacrificed people for his own purposes. The entity urged Ryoma to kill, desecrate, and give it his body, promising the power to destroy this world. Laura's voice tore the boy from his delirium, and the sisters confessed that they heard screams and forcibly burst into the room. Seeing them, Ryoma gasped for air, while Sarah was relieved to confirm that he was alive. The girl loosened her embrace and reminded the host about the food he had not touched since the moment of seclusion. After a brief hesitation, the boy admitted she was right. Laura explained that the screams forced them to break down the door. Both sincerely feared that the host was in trouble. Ryoma muttered about a spare key with the house owner, and only then did Laura realize the simpler way out. Downstairs, the hostess recognized the newly awakened guest and offered to bring him some still hot stew to the room. Even for Ryoma's considerable appetite, the portion turned out to be excessive. The woman irritably explained that she also had to feed 2 slave girls who had been starving along with him. Learning about 2 days without food, the boy finally understood how irresponsibly he had behaved with his sisters. He awkwardly thanked the hostess, but she called the care a usual part of her work. Ryoma correctly understood the hint and properly paid for the help. Returning, he suggested to the girls to finally eat together. Sarah anxiously asked the master to restrain his anger. After a pause, Ryoma sincerely apologized for making both worry. Laura reminded that this world he hated was their home, but the sisters would still remain on his side. Sarah confirmed the constancy of their devotion, and the touched boy called both silly. The younger sister at first was afraid that she had only made him angrier, but Ryoma finally relaxed and thanked them. Laura saw how he mastered the pain and realized that behind the adult behavior, there was still a young man who needed support. During the new hunt, the trio was tasked with collecting the bodily fluid of a giant praying mantis. Laura asked why the master did not live on Azoz's money, and Sari had to remind her that it was about the killed fat man. Ryoma explained that in this world, he had neither home, nor family, nor friends, and could rely only on himself. Therefore, he continued the path of an adventurer, turning his grandfather's knowledge into a way to understand a new reality. Along with this, the mentor's words about the huge power hidden in him sounded again in his memory. Laura denied the master's loneliness, since 2 of his slaves always remained nearby. Admitting his mistake, Ryoma apologized, although his sister did not demand an apology. On the city street, his attention was suddenly drawn to a man in a mask. In the Fulsar market, the guild master Vals Hanekel confessed to the trio about a difficult situation, confirming the suspicion of a forced task. A personal summons to the leader from the very beginning made Ryoma expect trouble. Usually such missions were entrusted only to high ranks, but Vals explained the choice by a severe shortage of people. An extremely important client demanded the escort of merchants from Fulsar to the kingdom of Ridsyria, and refusal threatened consequences. Guild certificates could temporarily block or even permanently revoke. A high reward, the best equipment, and mercenary support were meant to compensate for the danger of the forced mission. Ryoma distrustfully examined the issued equipment, doubting its claimed quality. Captain of the Crimson Lion, Liona, also considered the assignment suspicious. The merchants had no cargo, and only generous pay convinced the mercenary to agree to the escort. Liona introduced herself as the future companion, although she already suspected the mission would fail before it began. The captain named a man called Bolts as her right hand. He appraised the guild-hired adventurers with a careful look. 2 girls and a boy with one-handed weapons did not inspire confidence in the caravan's safety at all. Client Masaru, on the other hand, was interested in Ryoma's rare battle slaves. He offered to find them a better master and disdainfully stated that the girls belonged in bed, not on the battlefield. Ryoma politely suggested Masaru to solidify their acquaintance by demonstrating a secret technique from another world. The merchant cheerfully agreed to a back massage, unaware of the young man's hidden motive. Finding himself behind, Ryoma noticed that letting a martial arts master get close to his back was unwise. The most dangerous people often looked harmless, although Masaru was only praising the interlocutor's polite manners for now. A change in pulse revealed the merchant's secret thoughts, and the boy suddenly grabbed the liar by the throat. Later, Ryoma explained that Masaru's physical reaction confirmed the lie and the high likelihood of a trap. Liana understood the reason for the seizure, but the boy honestly added that he simply disliked the client. The main problem remained the ignorance of the true purpose of the conspiracy and the method of the future attack. Bolt suggested canceling the mission, but mere suspicions were insufficient for the guild. Refusal without evidence would damage the reputation and could cost the entire group their credentials. Ryoma realized that the imagined freedom of adventurers completely depended on the guild, without which it was difficult to find work or cross the border. Behind Masaru's lie stood someone more influential, and the merchant himself was likely a spy caught in a trap aimed at Ryoma. The luxurious carriage hinted at the involvement of nobility, and Liana pondered about additional fighters of the Crimson Lion. The boy refused to drag other people into his own problem, for which the captain called him either kind or incredibly foolish. She also reminded that the mercenaries themselves could very well have been planted assassins. Ryoma calmly accepted the risk and moved on to practice, entrusting Sarah to drive the carriage due to his own inability. The girl blushed and reminded that a slave woman does not need to politely ask to carry out the master's will. The young man asked Boltsa to help with magic, although Sarah immediately declared her own magical abilities. Later, Liana returned to the assumption that the main target of the conspiracy was precisely Ryoma. The captain did not rule out that the enemies were actually hunting her as the leader of a famous squad. She grimly warned that in case of the death of any of them, the rest should not envy the deceased. At the same time, Liana allowed the boy to drop respectful forms of address and speak more freely. Closing the distance, the mercenary openly began to flirt with him. Her proposal of a kiss was called an unacceptable sudden attack by the twins, but Liana only promised to make it less unexpected. To the confused sisters, she suggested to seclude themselves with Ryoma in a comfortable carriage and take some good spirits. Laura and Sarah categorically forbade intoxicating the underage master, even if he agreed himself. Ryoma unsuccessfully mentioned readiness for meetings and the absence of a direct prohibition, for which he was ordered to simply remain silent. Observers hidden in the bushes, meanwhile, confirmed the group's exit from the royal forest and the readiness of the plan. The commander ordered the archers to start firing, to split the escort and capture the target alive, not allowing the witch to cross the border. Sarah was the first to sense the enemies, and Ryoma ordered everyone to speed up and break through the arrows. The lieutenant reported a mounted chase, which Liana had already managed to notice. All arrows flew at their carriage, finally convincing the boy that the imperial trap was aimed specifically against him. Ryoma ordered the merchants to rush forward and prepared Sarah for the dangerous detachment of the carriage. At the right moment, the girl followed the order and increased the gap from the pursuers. A new threat appeared ahead. The merchants unexpectedly directed their swords against their own escort. The enemies declared the start of the attack, forcing Ryoma to instantly rebuild the plan. He expected to be surrounded from both sides, but the fight among the merchants themselves was a real surprise. Just the day before, the group had discussed the inevitable ambush in detail. Knowledge of tomorrow's attack gave them the only advantage time to prepare their own response. Liana doubted the usefulness of the prediction itself and demanded a concrete way to use it. Ryoma repeated the main point. Confidence in the trap already narrowed the possible actions of the enemy. Bolt suggested that the advantage would go to the side that struck first and seized the initiative. The boy agreed, adding that a predetermined attack location would provide an even stronger tactical position. The escort of legitimate merchants to Ridsyria allowed the group to move freely, and an open attack would turn the pursuers into criminals. Just as they could not deal with Masaru without evidence, so the enemies could not publicly attack an ordinary caravan. Therefore, the small detachment had to choose a secluded place and compensate for the lack of numbers with an ambush. Bolts pondered the geographical advantage, but feared a random choice of the attack point. Ryoma rejected randomness because a foolish plan would undermine the trust and fighting spirit of the attackers themselves. Exhausted by explanations, Bolts joked with Liona, but the captain pretended not to hear him. The most suspicious place the boy named was the mountain valley near the Ritsyria border, ideal for an ambush. Liona suggested a night attack, but Ryoma considered darkness disadvantageous for the enemies. At night, attackers risked injuring their own and not recognizing the target, unless a fool named himself before the strike. The memory of Sato distracted Ryoma for a moment and made Liona ask again about the strange reaction. Returning to the topic, the boy summarized the attack location and warned about the possible involvement of enemy mages. Without special protection against magic, the enemy could use a rockfall or fire arrows to create chaos. Particular attention had to be paid to the merchants who, after the battle began, could join reinforcements and strike from behind. Liona called such an encirclement dangerous pincers, but Ryoma did not consider them decisive. A double strike worked against an equal opponent, while a stronger group could simply break through one side of the ring. When the ambush really began, the boy knew that his own surprise was already waiting for the attackers. But the behavior of the merchants suddenly aroused suspicion that they were not at all who they pretended to be. After the clash, Liona reported about the entire fighters of the Crimson Lion and several fallen mercenaries. Despite the losses, Ryoma ordered not to deviate from the plan and to immediately withdraw the people from the battlefield. The captain took upon herself to gather the scattered mercenaries and lead them forward. Meanwhile, the attackers found an empty carriage and realized that the wanted witch had slipped out of the trap. The enraged team rushed in pursuit, and Ryoma became interested in the strange marking of their true target. Liona considered the bait successful, but the boy still felt a hidden mistake. The completion of the plan now depended on the girl to whom they entrusted the final phase. The day before, Ryoma found Laura alone under a tree and quietly called her. The embarrassed sister immediately apologized and promised to start preparing for the next day right away. The boy explained that he came with an important matter, but Laura fearfully decided that they wanted to drive her away. She was sure that the master hated battle slaves and preferred delicate girls. Laura called her own muscles disgusting, and the stunned Ryoma hurried to assure her of her excellent shape. Finally, he was able to move on to the task that concerned the final part of their plan and was only within her power. The enemy had to be lured into the magic circle, and after the signal, Laura was to trap them with a single spell. The girl resolutely promised to destroy 100 or even 1,000 attackers. Ryoma approved of the zeal, but reminded about the high speed of mounted targets. Laura admitted that the unstable wind slash was poorly suited against horsemen. That was why Bolts was to help her the right hand of Liona and the heart of the Crimson Lion. The sister considered the experienced mage stronger and only wanted to support him in battle. Ryoma objected. In their squad, his battle slave ranked higher, and only she could complete the decisive task. At the crucial moment, Laura recalled the confidence of the master, who called her the only one capable of turning the battle. The pursuers ordered not to let the witch escape and to kill everyone nearby. The mercenaries were afraid that the merchants were moving straight into the future strike and would die along with the enemies. For Ryoma, they were neither allies nor real targets, and the bait had already served its purpose. The merchants themselves did not attack them before the ambush, so the boy called Sarah for the final decision. Ordering her to hold on tighter, he asked if she liked Masaru, whose disgusting words she remembered well. Sarah confessed her hatred without hesitation, after which the same question was asked to Liona. The captain also did not forget the humiliation of the girls and responded with deep, sincere hatred. What Ryoma heard was enough to order Sarah to move forward. The girl obeyed her master's will without objection. Raising his sword, Ryoma loudly gave Laura a conditional signal. The girl addressed Mother Earth and summoned giant spears capable of piercing everything in their path. Stone bamboo turned the area into a deadly trap, and Liona immediately ordered to search for survivors. Bolts quickly reported about the prisoners, while Ryoma checked Masaru's condition. The first joint spell destroyed almost all the enemies, but Bolts gave all the credit to Laura and her woven magic. An outraged Masaru demanded an explanation for the cruel treatment of the client. Ryoma replied that the merchants lost this status the moment they drew swords against the guards. The cold look of the young man confirmed he did not consider Masaru's people to be real traitors at all. Seeing the weapon in his hand, the traitor panicked and Ryoma promised to silence him forever. Masaru began to justify himself and shifted the blame onto the knights of Ridsyria. He called them merciless dogs of the kingdom, which intrigued Ryoma about his true nature. The man admitted to being a former thief and slave trader and offered cheap slaves in exchange for his life. His words only further confused the reasons for the conflict, while Masaru contemptuously called Ryoma a novice. Bolts decided to extract more information from the liar, and delicately did not allow the excited Laura to take part in this task. At the plea for mercy, Ryoma reminded that after deliberate deception, Masaru had no right to complain about the consequences. Meanwhile, the ambush commander did not understand how the hunt for a dangerous future witch turned into a complete defeat. Ryoma recognized the captive as Captain Mihil Denashu from the Royal Guard of Ridsyria. It was his squad that was desperately searching for the next contender for the throne. Mikkel asked Laura to name not only her first name, but also her surname, needed to confirm her origin. A pedigree was mandatory for a claim to the crown, but Ryoma could not reveal the Malfists. Quickly orienting himself, he introduced the girl as Laura Mikazubu and called himself her brother. Mikkel skeptically clarified whether the young man was actually an elder relative. Ryoma rejected both seniority and paternity, after which the captain admitted defeat and asked for a quick death. The boy refused to kill without reason, although Liana reminded the prisoner of his own attempt to destroy them. The most important thing was that the knights had not yet become true enemies of Ryoma. Mikkel suspected noble envoys, but the boy's denial only revealed a deeper problem. Ryoma proposed exchanging answers. First, the captain had to share his own information. Before the interrogation, the young man grabbed him by the throat, calling this grip a safe talisman against lies. Sarah introduced herself and took on the role of the one who would ask questions. She began by confirming the squads belonging to the Royal Guard of Ridsyria. Next, the sister was interested in whether the attack was part of the struggle for the throne and the protection of the princess. The following questions concerned the conflict between the knights and the nobility, the death of the king, and the senior princess's primary right. Sarah also mentioned the nobles who hid behind the monarch's will and supported the second claimant. Ryoma saw how hard it was for Mikkel to respond to precise questions, but did not blame him for his silence. The final test was the identity of the person the captain truly wanted to kill. The answers formed a coherent picture, leaving Ryoma only with questions about the further consequences. Liana realized that they had been used as bait, and the innocent-looking Vals was playing a dangerous double game. Bolt suggested turning to other guilds, but without solid evidence, no one would believe them. The risk of exposure was too high, while Laura suggested that Shira's death might have ended the conflict. Even proven involvement of Vals did not guarantee victory over his influence. The luxury of the guild residence in Fulsar showed how easily such a man could bribe the necessary witnesses. The largest trading city gave its master power that required serious support to oppose. Ryoma asked Bolts to evaluate Masaru as a warrior and learned that ordinary torture would hardly make him talk. A sudden mention of an iron rod showed that the mage had already devised another method. Bolts calmly suggested using it so cruelly as to break the stubbornness of the slave trader. Laura enthusiastically decided to record the method for the future, while Ryoma only sighed heavily. Despite their conversation, Mikkel fiercely refused to accept the version of events imposed by the nobles. He called the current claimant to the role of the first princess an ordinary lie of the nobility. The only legitimate heir recognized by the captain was Lady Lupis. Ryoma calmly agreed with this conclusion. Ryoma explained that the sought-after girl was not a royal bastard, although she really came from nobility and traveled with him. Sarah called herself proof, as she was her twin sister, so the knights were deliberately deceived. Mikkel refused to listen to nonsense, but Ryoma only wanted to compare Masaru's testimony with the version of the Ridsyrian guard. After the king's death, Princess Lupis was preparing for the coronation when rumors appeared about a girl with the same bloodline. An unknown bastard without any status was suddenly declared the legitimate heir to the throne. It was then that Marquis Helgart showed the late king's will in favor of the girl, who supposedly lived in Maesta. The knights loyal to Lupis doubted the document, and the dispute escalated into an open war for the throne. Skilled in battle but weak in politics, the princess's supporters gradually lost the struggle for influence to the nobility. Secret information informed them about people from Maesta who were crossing the Marquis' lands and heading to Ridsyria. Among them was supposedly a silver-haired teenage girl of royal blood. The knights decided to stop her at any cost, and Mikkel confirmed exactly such an ambush plan. Ryoma considered the operation pointless because even the girl's death would not remove the cause of the struggle. While the guard chased the decoy, the real bastard could already have been safely escorted into the country. Lyanna realized that the nobles had deliberately fed the knights false information. The conspiracy included bribing the guild master and hiring a petty traveler whose life was easy to sacrifice. Mikkel could not retreat because there was still a chance for masterful disguise, and the especially timely appearance of the group strengthened suspicion. This was exactly the reaction they were counting on. Vals was getting rid of knights with Masaru's hands and earning the favor of the nobility. Ryoma urged not to get stuck in the past, since now both sides found themselves in a losing position. As a way out, he proposed a temporary alliance and mutual assistance. During the break, Mikkel took Leona's mockery as an insult to knightly honor. Ryoma noticed Laura's concern and learned about a new quarrel between the captains. The mercenary did not recognize honor in a person who had just tried to kill them, while the knight justified himself by the lack of choice. The boy saw an insurmountable difference between mercenaries who served profit and knights who adhered to morality. Leona called all knights stupid strongmen, instantly provoking Mikkel's rage. Interested, Sarah asked to explain the meaning of the unfamiliar expression. Ryoma described such people as those who first acted with muscles and only then used their heads. This straightforwardness could be either a virtue or a flaw, depending on the circumstances. Laura unexpectedly repeated to her sister the question about possible slavery. Sarah again promised to return the enslaved Laura at any cost and through any number of deaths. In the palace of the first Princess Lupis, meanwhile, she spoke sternly to the deputy of the guard Mikkel. She received a report from Meltina about the failed mission and openly expressed dissatisfaction. Ryoma sensed an escalation of danger and ordered Laura to remain silent during the princess's speech. The sister obeyed but whispered a request to assess the situation. The boy called Lupis extremely dangerous and noted the special weight of the word mission. It proved the princess's awareness of the attack and her attempt to get rid of the rival. Exposure of the conspiracy could have forced the court to kill all involved and accidental witnesses, including guests. Ryoma suspected Meltina of passing information and mentally called her act unwise. The report of failure put the loyal Mikkel at risk just when the fate of the state depended on unity. Lupis reminded that his mistake cost the lives of many knights who fell for the glory of the kingdom. Ryoma silently noted the irony. His squad had killed those warriors, and their commander now stood alive before the princess. As the ruler, Lupis announced the death sentence as the expected payment for failure. However, the execution was postponed because the cunning trap of the nobles gave the captain a chance to atone for his guilt. Mikkel immediately swore loyalty and promised never to disappoint the princess again. Sarah did not understand the decision, and Laura explained that formally the doomed knight actually received salvation. The younger sister accepted this simple meaning of the political speech. Ryoma noticed that Lupis did not mention the preparation of the attack and presented the death of the knights only as a consequence of the noble trap. Thus the princess turned failure into her own advantage, skillfully managing the facts and their perception. Closing the captain's case, Lupis called Laura forward. She directly clarified whether the girl really had no blood relation to the late King Ritsyria. Laura confidently confirmed this and officially stated the full name Laura Malfist. Next to her, she named the younger sister Sarah Malfist. The familiar surname reminded Lupis of old records from the central continent. Meltina noted that the wanted bastard girl, according to available information, did not have a sister. The princess did not rush to a conclusion, but noted the undeniable resemblance of the twins. She postponed the conversation with Ryoma, inviting the guest to rest in the palace for now. At the end, Lupis lifted a precious vase and deliberately drew attention to it. To the interested boy, she offered to accept the gift as a symbolic apology for captivity. Internal strife continued to cause similar mistakes, and the vase itself was of extraordinary value. Ryoma honestly admitted his ignorance in art and shifted the conversation to a more important matter. Lupis correctly understood his hint about joining her army, but asked for time to decide. The boy clarified whether they could just leave, but the princess did not give such permission. Then Ryoma declared Lupis had 0 chances of victory, causing the outraged Meltina to draw her sword. The knight called the commoner an arrogant fool who had no right to say such things before the princess. Lupis remained calm and ordered her subordinate to hide the weapon, not allowing the dispute to become a fight. Maltina hesitated, but the repeated order stopped the resistance. The princess reminded about the debt to Ryoma and asked him to repeat his thought. The young man promised to become the decisive reinforcement and bring her victory. Lupis carefully assessed the guest's confidence, wishing to see proof. Ryoma guaranteed the fulfillment of the promise and all the benefits of the agreement, after which the princess made a decision. Meanwhile, Sarah silently lifted the gifted vase. She already understood that, for Lupis' future victory, her master would need money. The princess respectfully noted the exceptional devotion of Ryoma's slave. After returning, they found a slightly drunk Lionu, who greeted them with a glass and demanded news. The captain waited for the group and enjoyed excellent royal wine, preparing to act herself if necessary. Bolts revealed her true faith in Ryoma's success, for which he immediately received an order not to say too much. The boy's gratitude made Lionu blush and deny any outside influence on her own decision. Changing the subject, she again asked to drop the formality, because now they were comrades. In response, Ryoma reported the need for new mercenaries. Besides Bagrian 100 more fighters were needed for the plan conceived for him. Stunned, Liona estimated the urgent hiring and supplies at about 300 gold coins. Sarah showed a vase, but the captain reminded about the necessity of real money and the absence of traces. Ryoma ordered Laura to prepare 300 gold coins by tomorrow, and the rest to find people. Liona agreed to the deadline, although Boltz's proposal to celebrate was declined by the boy due to tomorrow's battle. Meanwhile, in Ultomia, Sato received an order to leave the capital the next day, because it was time to decide the fate of Ridsyria. In Ridsyria itself, Count Alan Bergston highly appreciated the abilities of the young Mikashiba. Count Elnenzel supported the praise and called Ryoma a rare guest with whom it was truly interesting to talk. The arrival of the royal knight Maltina Rector instantly filled the meeting with demands for explanations. Alan noted her speed, and Elnenzel jokingly declared himself the winner of a bet for a bottle of good wine. Severe Maltina pointed at Ryoma and finally demanded an explanation for the strange gathering. The letter ordered her to hurry to Count Bergston's castle, leaving no room for delay. Now the knight wanted to get a clear reason for all this fuss. She reminded that Princess Lupis had already entrusted Mikazubai with an important task. Alan reluctantly acknowledged the decision to support the princess in the upcoming war for the throne. Maltina was stunned that along with Bergston, the same choice was made by Elnenzel. Both influential aristocrats had previously strictly maintained neutrality between knights and nobility. After many rejected proposals, their sudden shift seemed suspiciously abrupt. At the same time, Maltina saw hope in the fact that the powerful counts finally recognized the justice of her cause. Alan's uncertain answer showed that the knight had jumped to conclusions. Elnenzel laughed and remarked that Maltina's famous straightforwardness helped him sober up this time. She immediately suspected that it was Ryoma who convinced the counts to show proper respect to the legitimate heiress. Ryoma denied his own influence and explained that the counts were promised lands and ministerial positions in exchange for favorable neutrality. Maltina frowned because she had never heard of such an agreement. The boy referred to connections among the nobility and allegedly conducted negotiations that persuaded the counts to Lupis. The calmed knight acknowledged the logic of the transition and stopped looking for a hidden sensation. She wanted to provide soldiers as an honorary royal guard, but reproached Ryoma for the lack of frontline honor. For the feudal lords, such service was extremely beneficial because the honorary guard did not require personal combat. Alan reminded that the desire for the front line was natural for a devoted knight, but not for land rulers. Previous allies of Lupis after the battles did not receive positions or resources, although they risked their own people. The counts demanded guarantees of rewards and protection of cities from the inevitable looting during the Civil War. Elnenzel clarified whether neutrality meant complete independence from General Godrum. Ryoma confirmed that both counts would not enter military structures and would not be subordinate to the commander-in-chief. Elnenzel called the proposal attractive, although it could make him a political exile for decades. Alan jokingly admitted the chance of getting a ministry just for maintaining neutrality was almost perfect. Maltina got confused again and asked to explain why an alliance with Godrum was undesirable. Sarah also saw a valuable trump card in the discussed agreement that could not be lost. When the others dispersed, Meltina called Ryoma again. The boy turned around and was surprised by her unusual appearance. The knight angrily explained that the sisters and the count's maids had forcibly dressed her up. At the demand to better educate the slaves, Ryoma took responsibility for the inconvenience caused by his family. Meltina waved off the trifle and returned to the truly important topic. She suspected that Ryoma was deliberately forming a third power in the state from neutral nobles. A similar division into 3 hostile camps had already occurred in the history of other countries. The boy acknowledged a distant similarity, but the true intentions of General Godram Aliberg remained unknown. Even Lupiz's support could conceal the commander-in-chief's desire to completely seize military power. Godram's behavior in the case of Mikkel also did not resemble loyalty, so the victory over the nobility did not yet end the struggle. Alan agreed with the danger of the knightly faction and began to gather neutral aristocrats. The combined forces of the 2 counts amounted to only about 2,000 warriors, which was insufficient for the plan. Ryoma needed an additional army or a person capable of matching Godram. Alan knew where to find exactly such a talented figure. Elnanzel named the former commander-in-chief, Lady Alina Steiner. Ryoma was surprised to learn that this famous woman was not of royal but common origin. The respectful address to an ordinary citizen also remained unclear. Dignity, combat skill, and talent allowed Alina to become a general and receive the title of saint. Despite the sudden resignation, she remained a popular heroine whose support equaled 1,000 warriors. Her name could bring new lords to Lupiz, but the old enmity with Godram complicated the alliance. The presence of the general near the princess became a serious obstacle for Alina. According to rumors, Godram kidnapped her husband and daughter and forced her to give him the position of commander-in-chief. In the suburb of Rudsyria, a maid informed Alina about unexpected guests. Long deprived of visitors, the mistress ordered to invite them to the room. Seeing Alina, Ryoma thought she looked more like a housekeeper than a great general. Meltina politely greeted first. She introduced herself as Meltina Lester, a royal knight and devoted servant of Princess Lupiz. Ryoma said the full name, and Alina immediately recognized the person familiar from rumors. The former general had heard about the mercenary who managed to attract the personal attention of the princess. The young man praised her knowledge and reminded her of the title of the White God of War of Rudsyria. Alina dismissively rejected the outdated nickname and bluntly asked to state the purpose of the visit. Ryoma directly offered her to support Lupiz in the upcoming war. Meltina was frightened by the sharpness, and Alina replied that she would not object to the princess if it were not for the need to serve alongside Godram. Knowing her past, the boy offered not a place in the knight's faction, but personal service to the heiress herself. Alina ironically clarified whether it was about the role of protector of the throne, and Meltina felt hope for the first time. Alina ironically clarified whether it was about the role of protector of the throne, and Meltina felt hope for the first time. Meltina assured that only Lupiz was worthy of the throne and always put the welfare of the people above herself. Ryoma reminded that good qualities alone did not determine the right to the crown, causing new outrage from the knight. He understood that Alina did not seek glory or power, but was waiting to discuss special conditions. The former general suggested guessing them, forcing Meltina to think seriously. Ryoma asked the knight to leave them alone, which frankly stunned her. He urged trust, and Alina noted the youth's insight with surprise. Unspoken simple conditions meant a painful story that the mistress found hard to talk about in front of witnesses. Alina felt that she had finally met a person capable of truly understanding her. Ryoma quietly recalled the old feud with Godram and the suffering of her family. After a brief hesitation, the woman decided to reveal the truth. From the man, she was left only with a severed head and a letter with a promise to release the daughter in exchange for immediate resignation. Surrounded by enemies, the commoner accepted the demand as the only logical chance to save the child. Ryoma cautiously asked if she had evidence of Godram's guilt. At first, there was no evidence, but Alina rejected the knightly duty and eventually gathered enough materials against the culprit. She coldly confirmed Godram Aliberg's guilt and demanded one promise to avenge all that was done. After leaving the house, Meltina confessed with relief how worried she was about the outcome of the meeting. The knight expected Lupiz's joy at the new alliance, but Ryoma's grim expression made her wary. The boy was silent, mentally returning to Alina's last words. Before leaving, he asked if she had managed to save her daughter. The former subordinate found out that the girl was sold to slave traders, raped, and after losing value, killed. Left alone, Elena sat motionless for several minutes in complete silence. The maid cautiously noted that the young guest seemed much older than his years. Elena barely smiled and confessed that this boy had cried for her and her deceased daughter. His sympathy became the light she desperately lacked in the endless darkness. In the Red Military Chronicle, the subordinate requested 30,000 soldiers for the campaign, but the emperor rejected the too risky plan. The officer still believed that the island people could be defeated by a regular army without mercenaries. Ryoma recalled his grandfather's stories and pondered the rare opportunity to read the military manuscript of the Sun Dynasty in the original. Enthralled by the book, he lay relaxed with his head on the knees of the patient Laura. The girl reminded him of the time, and the boy apologized for using her knees as a pillow for so long. Laura saw no problem, because serving the master was supposed to ensure his comfort even outside of combat duties. While fetching water, she thought that Ryoma had the right to any order, but never abused his power. Liona stealthily approached, and with a sudden shout, revealed a gap in her vigilance. Frightened, Laura was outraged by the rude joke capable of scaring anyone. The mercenary woman cheerfully apologized and admitted that she couldn't resist such a carefree goal. Then she asked about Ryoma and learned that the master had gone to an important conversation at the mercenaries' camp. Laura was surprised by the curiosity, since Liona herself had recently been traveling the same path. The captain had already finished recruiting fighters and did not want to waste time on new negotiations. Years of command experience allowed her to quickly gather people for the future victory of the princess. Liona could not leave Ryoma, although she understood the knight's dissatisfaction with the mercenaries on their training field. In response to the question about Sarah, Laura explained that the sister was looking for the military books needed by the master in the castle. Liona joked that the girl left alone could unexpectedly turn into a merchant. The older sister assured of Sarah's much better behavior, and the mercenary immediately saw free time for Laura in this. The embarrassed girl reminded about water, but Liona called her activity boring. The captain was surprised that the battle mage spent her abilities on such a simple task. Laura considered it the duty of a slave to perform any feasible task for the master. Ryoma did not give such an order, which only confirmed Liona's usual softness towards her sisters. The girl called the master kind to his own and merciless to his enemies, and the mercenary noted special care for the twins. Laura embarrassedly began to object, but her reaction only revealed her feelings. She fervently asked to stop the silly hints, while Liona was enjoying the beauty of youth with pleasure. Liona added that young men would always notice Laura, while she herself was surrounded only by rough, muscular mercenaries. The sister suddenly burst into tears and admitted that Ryoma's kindness pressed on her with a feeling of incomplete trust. Liona sincerely apologized for the excessive joke, but did not understand Laura's mention of her own request to be treated like cattle. An angry Sarah intervened at that moment and accused the captain of the sister's tears. The mercenary assured it was a misunderstanding, and Laura herself asked in surprise to explain the quarrel. The real problem was not Liona, but the threat of killing the master, who had already entered the fight. The force of the blows in the duel cracked the ground with a web and stunned the spectators. The opponent thanked Ryoma for the help, because he finally awakened him from a half-asleep state. Laura became even more frightened upon learning about the opponent's rank and powerful magic. Liona, on the other hand, did not rush to intervene and believed that Ryoma would manage on his own. Both sisters did not share her calm, so the captain had no choice but to agree with their anxiety. The enemy doubted that an F-rank adventurer without magic could oppose him at all. Ryoma acknowledged the power of his spells without losing confidence. The mocking opponent ordered not to be distracted and to prepare for a new strike. The boy noticed an excessive dependence on magic and wasteful use of power. The provocative mention of Kuro finally hurt the enemy's pride. The enraged fighter immediately launched an attack. Ryoma, surprisingly, easily knocked him to the ground. To the stunned opponent, he explained the technique using the Ryuzen school method. Laura wanted to rush to the master, but bolts blocked the way. He called the clash an honest duel of warriors and refused to let even the sisters pass. Sarah could not believe what she saw, and Liona apologized to Bolts for being unable to restrain the twins. The girls demanded explanations, and the captain's hesitation revealed her prior knowledge. The opponent recognized the Ryuzen school and stated that he also knew one of its techniques. Ryoma fearlessly offered to demonstrate the technique. The enemy's stance resembled a pine corner and confirmed affiliation with the mentioned school. The fighter named the technique karate and tried to mock Ryoma's specialization. The young man seriously replied that this skill could not compare to his grandfather's knowledge. The offended opponent lost self-control and charged forward again. Ryoma dodged, intercepted the hand, and with a powerful throw drove the enemy into the ground. The spectators erupted with shouts and declared Mikashiba the winner. The fall could have been fatal, but Boltz personally took it upon himself to check the wounded. Laura still demanded to tell the truth about the strange duel. Ryoma apologized and explained that he exposed the disguised killer among the mercenaries and lured him into an open fight. Liana was happy not only about the victory, but also about the one bet, for which the boy called her a greedy madwoman. The sisters could have eliminated the threat earlier, but the secret duel rather united the mercenaries around the new leader. All the fighters were now enthusiastically discussing Ryoma's strength, and Liana asked Laura to trust the master more. The girl blushed and apologized to the captain for the mistaken outrage. Liana promised to keep her maiden secret, but hinted at another hidden truth. Ryoma had already decided that even after his death, the sisters should continue a normal life. He repeatedly told this to the captain and considered outside interference a threat to the duel's outcome. The worried boy asked Liana not to tell any more, but she still assured that Laura and Sarah were truly dear to him. The elder sister rejected these words because she considered the slave unworthy of love. Ryoma seriously declared the beginning of the war. Laura instantly composed herself and confirmed her readiness to serve the master. An ordinary orphan, after one twist of fate, suddenly received the title of princess. Now everyone called her Raiden Ridsirianis, although the girl herself did not know who she really was. The new status did not absolve her of guilt for the country, which was sinking deeper into civil war. Elsewhere, a man remembered Grandpa Frank, who often worried about Lady Alina's health. Before those present, the man firmly placed himself at their disposal and agreed to carry out any task. Ryoma noticed that Alina clearly knew the volunteer much better than the others. He was the grandson of Frank Morgan, her former right hand, and an outstanding commoner with great abilities. Alina would not guarantee victory in a fight against him, and among other things, noted the man's attractive appearance. The news of the return of the White God of War led to a coalition of more and more neutral lords, and at the same time sharply increased the workload. Alan proudly predicted new knights, switching to the side of the glorious Alina. Elnanzel jokingly declared himself the most devoted admirer, and Alan did not turn the dispute into a quarrel. The too rapid growth of their forces worried Ryoma about the possibility of an immediate enemy response. Arrogant and cruel Godrum did not shy away from discrimination, so he never had special love among the people. The strengthening of the coalition inevitably forced the general to act, although events were already slipping out of his control. Ryoma wanted to immediately resolve the supply, remembering that their army was the personal guard of the princess, not an ordinary military force. It was this status that created quite special organizational difficulties. Meltina brought troubling news. Godrum betrayed Lupis and joined the noble faction. Elnanzel could not believe in the alliance of ancient bloody enemies, the general and Duke Helgart. However, Godrum's troops had already entered the noble lands and effectively strengthened the enemy. Rumors about the persecution of bandits turned out to be a cover for the unconditional joining of the army to the nobles. Alan became angry, realizing how easily the general deceived them with promises of a simple operation against criminals. Alina recognized the betrayal as irreversible and postponed the final strategy development to the morning military council with Lupis. The situation reminded Ryoma of historical defeats, after which rulers lost the chance to unite the state. The alliance of Helgart with Godrum finally changed the balance of power, like a betrayal on the eve of a great battle. At the same time, the suddenly expanded enemy army had a complex problem with food and resources. The possible intervention of a third faction opened new moves, and Alina noted Ryoma's strategic thinking. She herself did not panic, because she considered death an inevitable event that would come at a designated time. The boy called her death a catastrophe, and the general suggested hitting Godrum's supply lines in a protracted war. Exhaustion did not greatly harm their forces, but even Alina's natural death could completely change the course of events. Ryoma asked not to joke about the disappearance of the main commander, and she reminded him of the hatred towards men with false hopes. Not reacting to the hint, the young man asked for one favor after a possible victory. At the morning council, Meltina called the plan to send mercenaries into the offensive madness. The enemy had over 60,000 soldiers, even without counting Godrum's army. Ryoma explained that he did not intend to attack the entire force, but only wanted to create a bridgehead on the Phoebus River. Alan approved the plan because the new enemy alliance still remained fragmented. This gave a chance to build fortifications directly on the route of the future crossing. The advantageous landscape allowed turning the fortress into an almost impregnable obstacle and changed the course of the war. Ryoma realized that he had underestimated the strategic abilities of the Count, mistaking him for an ordinary strongman. Elena found the plan interesting, but asked how to discreetly build fortifications directly on the water. The boy already had a separate plan, and Lupis, due to military inexperience, handed the decision over to the general. Elena understood that Ryoma had brought her from the start precisely because of the predictable trust of the princess. After a pause, she called the strategy exceptionally brilliant, and Lupis nervously agreed. The support was dictated by benefit, not sympathy for the young author. In case of failure, Ryoma's mercenaries would die first, so Elena only wished him to survive. The boy smiled and promised to make every effort. At the front, Lionel critically assessed his usual seriousness and readiness to take risks. Bolts demanded concrete measures of protection against the inevitable hostile strike. For a separate part of Ryomi's strategy, their help was exactly needed. Laura finished distributing the new mercenaries and reported suspicious people among them. Possible assassins or spies appeared again, whose true role she had not yet determined. Sarah suggested immediately getting rid of the dangerous recruits. Instead, Ryoma decided to keep them and feed the enemy deliberately false information. He dismissed the threat of a night assassination because he did not consider himself weak enough for an easy death. Lionel suggested that everyone sleep with him every evening, supposedly solving two problems at once. Sarah blushed and sharply objected, and Laura suspiciously clarified what exactly was Lionel's second goal. The captain hastily called the proposal an innocent joke. Outside the royal capital of Xerius, Ryoma gathered all the mercenaries. With one raised gesture, he gave the signal to march. In a few days, the army reached the southern bank of the Phoebus River. Mikkel prepared a small detachment for reconnaissance and reported readiness to depart immediately. Ryoma allowed the mission, but strictly ordered to retreat immediately upon encountering the enemy. The impatient knight confirmed understanding and led the people forward. The young man valued his respect for the inexperienced commander as true nobility of a warrior devoted to the crown. Returning to business, Ryoma ordered the rest to continue preparations exactly according to plan. Bolts led the first group and reminded that correct execution of practiced actions guarantees success. The mage tried to encourage the soldiers and relieve unnecessary anxiety. The sorcerers appealed to the spirit of the earth, and with the collapse spell began to change the very shape of the shore. Satisfied with the result, Bolts gave the first group 15 minutes to recover. The second detachment took positions, and Ryoma approached to check the progress of the construction. The work was on schedule, and the young man praised the subordinates for maintaining the pace. Despised as mere digging, the curse of collapse in his hands turned into a strategic construction tool. Against moving targets, magic was weak and easily blocked by objects, so combat use made no sense. Instead, for creating fortifications, its simplicity became the main advantage. Bolts quietly laughed at the obviousness he himself had not noticed before. He only thought that the young master did not realize his own exceptional value. Ryoma turned to the suspicious person, whom Bolts had already ordered Sari to constantly watch. The stranger caused an inexplicable unease and reminded him of someone from the past. The resemblance to Sato suggested a connection with Ultomia, although the boy did not rule out other options. Meanwhile, the scouts reported that the enemy was stationary and was not preparing an attack yet. The enemy forces numbered about 5,000 fighters, among whom were 2,000 horsemen. Mikkel recognized the threat as serious, and the intelligence assumed that the enemy already knew about the crossing plan. The captain agreed to immediately relay the information to Lord Mikazubai and praised the sound proposal. He had already ordered to retreat when one soldier asked to stay for just a minute. A scout noticed among the enemies a man resembling the commander. Mikkel demanded a spyglass and himself looked closely at the distant figure. Recognizing Kyle Aruni, the captain could not hold back a fierce curse. The familiar name stunned the soldiers, who did not want to believe in the presence of this man. Mikkel, without hesitation, called Kyle a traitor and determined the next step. Drawing his sword, he ordered everyone to retreat and report to Ryoma, and he himself prepared to attack. The scouts tried to dissuade the commander from fighting alone, but he did not listen to any objections. The knight's gaze remained on Kyle, whose crimes he could not forgive. After the repeated order, the soldiers obeyed, and Mikkel gripped his sword tighter and moved forward. In the camp, Laura noticed the host's anxiety, but he called it ordinary pensiveness. There was little time left until the fortress was completed, so Ryoma wanted to speed up the construction even more. Suddenly, a scout covered in blood and mud turned up, barely able to stand. His condition immediately showed Boltz and Ryoma that a disaster had occurred. The boy recognized subordinate Mikkel and immediately demanded explanations. The wounded man confirmed participation in the reconnaissance, gasping heavily from pain. According to him, Mikkel and the rest of the group had most likely already died. Seeing Kyle, the captain rushed at the much more numerous enemy and doomed the squad to battle. The traitor's name outraged the soldiers, while Ryoma only tried to understand his connection with the knights. The enemy army numbered about 5,000, but the scout did not know the exact number of pursuers. Ryoma sent Leon and Boltz with 400 warriors to the flanks and took 600 himself to defend the center. Both commanders accepted the order, while the wounded man tried to add a few more words. The scout begged forgiveness for disobedience that led the squad to tragedy. Ryoma placed responsibility on the commander, but the wounded man refused to accept the excuse. Mikkel initially retreated on command, but upon seeing Kyle lost self-control and his subordinates failed to stop him. The soldier painfully recalled Captain Lupiz's loyalty and his own readiness to die for her. Before losing consciousness, he strangely spoke about the only medal received for service. The mention of the award near death seemed incongruous to Ryoma, but there was no time for interrogation. With his last breath, the scout asked to promise that Lupiz would become the queen of Ridsyria. Ryoma immediately asked Boltz about an ordinary hoe. The mage suggested quickly digging a pit with a landslide, but the boy refused. He wanted to bury the fallen comrade with his own hands, and Laura took on the guard duty. By the ready grave, Ryoma again pondered the soldier's last words. The request to place Lupiz on the throne had now become the deceased's personal testament. Laura interrupted the thoughts with news of 5,000 enemies already a kilometer from the positions. Before deciding the fate of the kingdom, Ryoma had to survive this battle. Kyle stared in shock at the fortifications built in an impossibly short time. The river protected the flanks of the camp and almost made flanking impossible. The commander, irritably, did not understand how to now carry out Duke Helgart's order. The subordinate reminded about the impossibility of ignoring the mission, forcing Kyle to decide. The numerical superiority over 2,000 defenders pushed him to a full-scale assault. He confidently declared the improvised walls incapable of saving the enemy. On behalf of the Duke, Kyle allowed the soldiers to keep all the loot after the victory. After the report of readiness, he finally rejected the possibility of defeat. The order to attack immediately pushed the army forward. In the camp, Ryoma was outraged by the permission to loot their own country during the Civil War. Lyanna strictly forbade her fighters to retreat. The first squad received the order to open fire. Arrows laid the enemies one by one, even before approaching the fortifications. Enemy commanders drove the people forward, reminding them of the small number of defenders. Kyle again incited the hesitant soldiers with promised gold. Leona noticed the absence of formation and the miserable quality of the attackers' equipment. The second and third squads joined the fire, piercing the disorderly crowd. Kyle did not understand the failure of the huge numerical advantage and fiercely called his own people worthless peasants. The commander suggested retreating and regrouping because further movement became impossible. The arrogant leader rejected the very idea of retreat for the larger army. The southern gate held too firmly, and without reinforcements, the fortress could not be taken. Kyle struck a subordinate for doubt and ordered not to mock the nobility. He reminded about personal responsibility before Duke Helgard. Deciding to lead the assault himself, the commander directed all forces to the central gate. Ryoma saw a new move and realized that the enemy was not going to retreat. Such a risky stubbornness did not suit the experienced royal knight. The boy asked the soldier to describe Kyle and the reasons for his strange haste. In response, he heard about a self-loving, cowardly intriguer who humiliated dissenting knights. After the defeat by Mikkel at the tournament, Kyle harbored a particularly deep grudge. His betrayal of former comrades and Lupis herself caused so much hatred that Ryoma had to ask for a less emotional description. Putting aside anger, he defined Kyle as an extremely slippery and cunning person. That is why the thoughtless extermination of his own troops did not fit his character. The traitor handed over Helgart and the mistress, as well as old battle comrades, for the sake of a position as an enemy general. Presumably, Kyle wanted to retreat, but the need to prove usefulness to the new patron forced him to attack. Ryoma saw the moment to strike and ordered Laura to prepare earlier than planned. The girl hesitated, but the master decided to meet the crowd near the gates with several explosions. Smoke over the center of the fortress appeared to Kyle's soldiers as a sign of an imminent breakthrough. The commander immediately declared the defense broken and threw the entire army into a general assault. Lyanna was reorganizing the defense while the enemy gathered in a wedge and moved toward the breach. Ryoma urged his men to hold on a little longer and not let the attackers pass further. The slow advance once again drove Kyle to fury and demands for immediate results. Noticing Ryoma at the front line, he suspected in the audacious commander the very same hidden adventurer. The boy at that moment ordered to send a signal to Lyanna and Bolts. Both saw the sign and immediately launched the final part of the plan. Bolts called on the Crimson Lion to see the true power that had remained under their control all along. Together with Lyanna, he appealed to the blessed spirits of the earth. The double collapse changed the course and released the restrained water. The strange rumble caused alarm, but the soldiers continued the fight until the premonition became reality. Kyle drove them toward an allegedly close victory, but his speech was suddenly cut off by horror. A huge wall of water rolled onto the front rows and instantly destroyed the formation. The stream swept away the warriors, leaving them no chance to escape. Laura enthusiastically saw the precision of the master's calculation and noticed that only a few could swim. In the harsh world, this skill was usually acquired only by boatmen and fishermen. Knightly armor pulled people down even faster, buying the defenders a few days of rest. Enemy reconnaissance could still operate, so Ryoma ordered to rest and bury all the bodies. To the surprised Laura, he explained that he did not intend to give honors to the dead. The corpses had to be removed, so that decay would not bring disease to his own soldiers. The mercenaries grumbled unhappily because of the hard and unpleasant work. They were irritated by the ban on looting the defeated instead of the usual war trophies. The quarrelers were cut off by a strict woman who ordered them to do the work and forget about greed. Victory even without theft will increase the pay, whereas disobedience of the order will bring only punishment. She reminded of a person who cold-bloodedly drowned an entire army in mockery. The martial arts master easily defeated an enemy twice his size and would hardly have spared the treaty violator. The mercenaries immediately called the conversation a joke and hurried back to the graves. Sarah carefully watched the stern woman, memorizing every word. Meanwhile, Duke Helgart met Kyle with contempt, who dared to return after defeat. The commander bowed his head and deeply apologized for the failure. He supposedly survived only thanks to a horse that could swim and barely held on to it in the current. The Duke mockingly called it either incredible luck or the merit of the animal he had gifted. Official reports indicated otherwise. Kyle abandoned the soldiers and fled alone. The traitor trembled and began to justify himself, expecting immediate execution. Helgart did not intend to kill him, but forgiveness was out of the question. The punishment was only postponed, but the price of the rashly lost army was still to be paid by Kyle. After his departure, the Duke called the subordinate completely useless, causing the officer to doubt such mercy. Execution would not bring back the soldiers, so Helgart wanted to use Kyle to the end before General Godrum's arrival. The new ally should not show weakness, and now only the river captured by the enemy remained between the armies. The Duke was troubled not only by the speed of the fortress construction, but also by the commander's determination to drown thousands of people. He ordered his men to deal separately with the dangerous stranger. In Ryoma's camp, he predicted the absence of a night attack, and Laura gave the enemy a few days to recover. This time had to be used to prepare for the meeting with the main forces. Lyanna agreed to gather at least 10 people by noon for a new trial. Sarah suddenly greeted the stern woman cheerfully and offered help. She tensed because she did not feel the girl's approach at all. She recognized Sarah as a pot seller with harsh methods, and Sarah introduced herself as a battle slave. The younger sister enthusiastically praised the woman's yesterday's beating of the old man and rejoiced for her peer in the camp. Sarah had long wanted to talk, but her unusual friendliness seemed to the interlocutor a possible trap. Sakuya doubted that the slave could wander aimlessly around the camp and assumed that the master was simply tired of Sarah. The girl's upset appearance made the mercenary hastily call the offensive words a failed joke. Sarah smiled with relief and accepted the offer to help during the break and talk a little. She joyfully slipped about a successful bait, and the embarrassed interlocutor finally introduced herself as Sakuya. The unusual name became a reason to suggest celebrating the new friendship with a gifted bottle. Soon Sarah and Sakuya were already drinking alcohol together. The mercenary enjoyed the opportunity to avoid work, while the younger sister's voice increasingly revealed intoxication. Sakuya persistently poured a new portion and accepted no refusals. A simple plan to loosen her tongue backfired on Sarah herself, who mentally called the master for help. Sakuya mockingly admitted that she was only pretending to be drunk and was trying to extract information from the interlocutor herself. In the center of the camp, Ryoma was worried about Sarah, while Liana had just noticed the disappearance of the gift bottle. When the girl sobered up a bit, something suddenly flew out of Sakuya, although she assured in an unnatural voice that everything was fine. Her attention was immediately drawn to a group of people moving right on the water. Sarah assumed they were local merchants returning from business. Sakuya did not believe the explanation, as she was sure she had not seen these people here before. She concealed her suspicions and assured the worried Sarah that there was no problem. The sudden prolonged cause of the crows seemed too strange for a coincidence to both of them. Sakuya perceived them as a sign of an important night event. After finishing the break, she suggested returning to work before darkness fell. At night, the mercenary carefully oiled the blade with a special liquid. The absence of guards near the target greatly simplified the upcoming assassination attempt. Sakuya cautiously entered the tent, confident that Ryoma was sleeping inside. Her strike cut only a straw scarecrow instead of a living man. Seeing the bait, the killer realized she had walked into a trap herself. Ryoma immediately took advantage of the confusion and attacked. Sakuya quickly composed herself and irritably responded with a strike. Sarah appeared nearby and regretfully declared the game over. Seeing both identical sisters, the killer at first suspected shadow cloning but recognized the twins. Ryoma's next strike deprived her of consciousness. Upon waking, Sakuya heard the victor's overly friendly greeting. Now the boy could finally calmly talk with the captive. She called the upcoming conversation torture and reminded him of the shinobi's readiness for the worst. The shinobi's self-designation immediately stunned Ryoma. Sakuya understood the slip of the tongue and suspected a cunning question, although the young man truly did not know her secret. The captive woman suddenly accused him of intending to desecrate her body, despite the presence of two slave women. Laura wanted to kill the master's offender, but Ryoma stopped the use of magic in time. One of the main reasons for the capture was his sincere curiosity about the person Sakuya. She still suspected humiliation, forcing the boy to loudly deny the accusations. The captive's black hair, dark eyes, and tanned skin reminded Ryoma of people from his homeland. Before him was the same killer from the previous attack, whose appearance now took on a new meaning. The Japanese-sounding name and the word shinobi heightened suspicion. The last clue was the katana, which obviously originated from the culture of the earth. However, the question about Japan only caused sincere incomprehension in Sakuya. She had never heard of such a country and denied any origin from there. On the western continent, this name was also completely unknown to the captive. Ryoma recalled the blacksmith's words about the katanas of the eastern continent and checked another version. Sakuya stated that her clan had never left the west, although this did not explain the Japanese blade. The katana had belonged to her family for many generations and was passed down as a traditional weapon. The mention of the clan hinted at other bearers of such swords, but the conversation was suddenly interrupted by an old man. The stranger took the initiative and called their lineage the clan of eternal wanderers. Sakuya was surprised by the old man's appearance, and he explained that he had come as a backup assassin. In case of her failure, he was supposed to eliminate the target, which the granddaughter had not known before. Laura became wary, but Ryoma gestured for everyone to remain calm for now. The old man called the boy's composure either foolishness or absolute confidence in his own strength. Ryoma expressed surprise and subtly reminded that the uninvited guest had not been called to the tent. The stranger noted how easily the young man calmed his subordinates and behaved like the master of the situation. He was puzzled why the assassin Sakuya was still alive, and why no one had even tried to detain the old man. Ryoma suggested that the secret listener already had his own theory, but he wanted personal confirmation. The boy directly confessed his origin from Earth and the very same country as the clan's ancestors. The old man calmly confirmed the old suspicion and called Ryoma a man from Hinamoto. The young man specified the modern name Japan, and the guest recalled rumors about the weakness and cowardice of its current inhabitants. Ryoma's strength made one doubt these tales, after which the old man turned his attention to the stunned Sakui. Having ensured her readiness, he unexpectedly ordered his granddaughter to undress. The girl could not believe that she had to do this right in front of everyone. Any objections were categorically forbidden by the old man. Meanwhile, Duke Helgart irritably checked the reorganization of his army. A subordinate justified the delay with unexpected difficulties, although 3 days had already passed since the order. The main problem was the forced conscription of peasants from the surrounding lands. Information about the defeat leaked to the people, and now they refused to join the army. The peasants even knew about the drowning of over 5,000 of Kyle's soldiers due to the changed riverbed. Everyone was already calling Ryoma Mikashiba the creator of the cold-blooded and ruthless trap. The Duke did not understand the source of the details that even parts of his own army did not know. Frightened people refused to obey, questioning the gathering of even 50,000 new fighters. A series of failures made Helgart think that the devil himself was fighting on the enemy's side. In the tent, the old man swiftly cut Sakuya's clothes, using a primitive predecessor of modern aijutsu. Exceptional precision left no wounds on the body and frankly impressed Ryoma. The examination showed tiny traces of strikes directly on vital points. The old man suggested the use of a spear shaft, but the boy named his own fist as the only weapon. Such pinpoint impact truly explained the effectiveness of the unusual technique. The guest reported that young Sakuya was once to lead the clan, and respectfully acknowledged Ryoma's skill. The boy thanked and asked for permission to ask a few questions. First of all, he wanted to confirm the clan's origin from an ancient, summoned earthling. An ancestor was brought to this world about 500 years ago. Along with him, an entire village was summoned, although modern rituals only transported a few people each year. Ryoma estimated his own chance of getting here as 1 in 750 million. The thought of other Japanese led to the question of why the descendants of the summoned became killers. The old man called each clan member a rappa. Ryoma recognized in this an archaic designation for ninja. At the same time, he did not understand the nomadic life of shinobi, who usually served at courts on Earth. Excessive curiosity made the old man sharply demand the reason for the inquiries. The young man acknowledged the rudeness and apologized, earning a favorable laugh. The guest called him clever and introduced himself as Genu Igasaki. Immediately after the introduction, the old man suggested joining forces. Genu decided that Ryoma left Sakuya alive for the sake of a personal shinobi, and as her grandfather, he also agreed to serve. He did not ask the granddaughter's opinion, reminding her of Rappa's inevitable death after the failed mission. Mikashiba made efforts to save her, so Sakuya had to dedicate the rest of her years to him. The grandfather's sudden cheerfulness confused the girl even more. She recalled the childhood lesson to never abandon a given task. Genu confirmed this principle as one of the clan's foundations. Sakuya was breathing heavily and directly asked if the grandfather himself agreed with such a decision. Genu accepted the duty without hesitation and assumed that the clan's nomadic life would soon end. A week later, Laura still doubted whether former assassins could be trusted. Ryoma calmly wiped the gifted katana and clarified if it was about Genu and Sakuya. The shine of the perfectly polished blade captivated him much more than his sister's tense voice. Eventually, the boy directly asked if she was really dissatisfied with the decision. Laura reminded about the recent assassination attempt and the danger of sudden betrayal by professional killers. Ryoma acknowledged the risk, but from the beginning intended to give them freedom, so the change of plan was not critical. The sister suspiciously pointed to the katana as a significant reason for leniency. The boy did not deny the value of a friendly gift. However, the main conviction was that the clan deserved more trust than the knights. In response to the question about the reason, he recalled contradictory speeches about honor, justice, and betrayal. Ryoma called it simply reality, but such an explanation did not satisfy Laura at all. He thought that Bolts and other experienced warriors would understand the hint without unnecessary words. The sister exposed another gift, a cross-shaped spear, which the boy enthusiastically called wonderful. Then she mockingly asked if the master himself liked Sakuya, causing him to blush indignantly. Ryoma swore that he only needed skilled specialists in espionage. Laura agreed to follow his decision, but once again asked not to lose vigilance. The master's smile made her irritably demand serious attitude. At this moment, Ryoma felt a strange nostalgia for similar disputes. A sudden voice of Liona announced the arrival of the Ridsirian knights. Elena approached with a confident gait and easily apologized for the delay. After that, she directly met Ryoma's gaze. Helgart, meanwhile, did not believe Godrum's demand to hand over all military power to him. The Duke asked if he had correctly understood such a bold proposal. The general confirmed the intention and cited previous defeats as proof of Helgart's inability to command. The enraged Duke reminded that before him stood only a deserter general without the right to demand power. He invited Godrum because of tactical talent, but instead received an insult right at the beginning of the council. The general acted on the principle of striking first and was already mentally preparing to teach the arrogant lord a lesson. Helgart had 20,000 against Godrum's 2,000 men and could forcibly remove the rival. Even the peasant base of the army and the existing cavalry returned confidence to the Duke. Unexpectedly, Kyle openly supported the general's demand. He insisted on the necessity to transfer the position of commander-in-chief to Godrum. Kyle's own defeat supposedly proved the need for a stronger leader capable of leading the army to victory. Helgart was stunned and suspected that the general had already poached his subordinate. The possibility of a new betrayal seemed almost unbelievable to the Duke. Kyle calmly reminded of the devastating failure of the last assault. He accepted responsibility, but did not want to silently lose knightly honor. The Duke perceived these words as complete nonsense. However, Kyle directly accused him of being incapable of leading the army. He called Helgart not a knight, but a coward who sat in a chair and humiliated true warriors. Indifference to military affairs turned the soldiers' lives into mere toys. The Duke responded by recalling the horses, weapons, and opportunity to serve that had been provided. Kyle acknowledged these merits, but wanted better leadership precisely for the sake of victory. An impatient council member ordered to stop the long quarrel and speak directly. Then Kyle declared that he would rather die than serve a man without knowledge of the basics of war. Godrum laughed loudly and called such a high assessment a great honor. Another nobleman also supported the best option for victory, finally leaving the Duke without allies. Godrum promised to fully utilize the army's potential and crush the Lupis faction, gaining the council's approval. After the meeting, Helgart tried alone to understand his own mistake. A proud and influential family gave him no allies at the moment of political disaster. The Duke perceived the noble's easy defection to the enemies as a real state coup. His gloomy thoughts were interrupted by a stranger who ordered him to raise his head. Recognizing the last ally, Helgart almost desperately asked for help. A foreign state entrusted this man to continue the civil war for at least half a year, but the situation was rapidly deteriorating. The stranger still had a plan, although Godrum's power significantly limited the available moves. The Duke did not even want to hear the general's name, but he received a warning not to underestimate the enemy commander. Ryoma not only destroyed Kyle with water, but also skillfully spread rumors about the demon Heraklion. Fear had already taken root among the people, proving the simultaneous strength and cunning of the opponent. The whole series of events could have been a trap, but warning Godrum about it was disadvantageous. Instead, the stranger proposed turning the rumors themselves into a weapon. Laura reported to Ryoma about the absence of signs of a new fortress assault. The enemy could be preparing a decisive battle on the plain for old scores. A fight among the wheat fields would exhaust the supplies of the entire kingdom. The next taxes would also fall, although the army, which was already robbing its own people, could neglect the consequences. The widespread rumors demoralized mostly the peasant army of the enemy. The arrival of the royal knights and Elena gave the coalition a clear advantage in command and preparation. Sarah joyfully accepted the master's confidence in the inevitable victory. However, Ryoma himself was not free from a vague feeling of hidden danger. It was then that Alina addressed him. Without explaining her intention, the general handed the sword to Chris. The next moment, she jumped straight from the fortress wall. Landing, Alina loudly declared herself a dark knight who would plunge the world into the abyss. Ryoma did not understand the sudden fervor of the usually gloomy woman. The general enjoyed the air of the front line and admired the quickly erected fortress. She called his modesty hidden arrogance and predicted Lupiz's surprise. Ryoma told about Mikko, who broke the order, attacked during reconnaissance, and was now considered missing. Alina called it a nightmarish violation of military rules, regardless of the reasons. The boy was most worried whether the princess would now doubt his loyalty. The general staff objected, but reminded about Lupiz's special closeness with the knight devoted to her since childhood. Later, Alina personally delivered the report to the princess. Lupiz barely responded, and Maltina noticed her depressed state. Thanking her, the princess insisted that everyone leave her alone. In silence, she prayed only for Mikkel's survival. An unexpected male voice noted her deep sorrow. Lupiz fiercely looked at the calm stranger who had stealthily entered the chambers. The absence of any anxiety made his appearance even more dangerous. The princess demanded to immediately name the person and the purpose of the intrusion. The man introduced himself as Sudo Akihito, a humble mediator of a certain patron. In a light tone, he praised the talent of the army commander Mikashiba. Sudo joked about the exhausting sailing against the current and the pain in his old back. Lupiz understood that a solitary crossing of the river through patrols required exceptional strength. She ordered to stop joking and get down to business. The guest called himself a servant of the Duke, but asked not to simplify the real relations and to allow him to sit. Finally, he reported that Helgart was considering swearing allegiance to Lupiz. The princess mockingly rejected the incredible proposal of a man who rather demanded her surrender. It was the Duke who started the rebellion after fulfilling the king's last will and the appearance of an unknown child. After all the deaths, Lupiz saw only one reward for Helgart execution. Sudo calmly reminded how much she valued Mikkel's life and asked about the limits of trust in people. The princess's rage was suddenly cut off by a powerful chakra attack. Lupiz froze, not understanding the source of the strike. Sudo cheerfully called the sudden attack dangerous and unfairly cruel, even to an uninvited guest. A rare technique suggested to him that only one man could have used chakra here. Glancing into the dark corner, Sudo mockingly called Ryoma Mikashiba and reproached him for his silence. He demanded that Ryoma stop hiding and finally show himself. Meanwhile, Meltina silently crept up to Lupiz and called the princess to follow her. Hearing the familiar voice, Lupiz turned around with relief. Meltina apologized for the security oversight and promised to accept any punishment later. Having ensured the princess's safety, she signaled Ryoma, who ordered to start the plan. At that very moment, fire flared up and engulfed the entire tent. In panic, Lupiz demanded to extinguish the flames with water, shocking Meltina with her desire to save the enemy. Meltina tried to object, but the fire had already spread so much that help was impossible. Even amid the flames, Sudo maintained a calm smile and called this act too cruel. He feigned regret that he did not have time to rest, then became upset over his best burned clothes. Ryoma asked if the stranger was human, and he cheerfully rejoiced at the first remark addressed to him. Sudo in response called Ryoma a sociopath and again complained about his stubborn silence. Unable to endure the mockery, Ryoma launched an attack. Sudo dodged and laughed, addressing Makazuba as if to an old friend. He referred to the uneven quality of the weapons and suggested postponing the duel until the next meeting. Receiving no answer, the guest feigned a sigh over the complete ignoring. Noticing Ryoma's fiery combat stance, Sudo became alert and recognized the threat as serious. The smile concealed the understanding that the situation was rapidly worsening, and he could not die here. Lupiz stepped forward and asked Makazuba to stop. Ryoma saw no reason to wait, but the princess promised to explain everything and again asked to lower the weapons. Sudo sighed heavily because the silent and relentless Makazuba turned out to be an extremely inconvenient interlocutor. He declared Helgart's readiness to swear allegiance to Lupiz and return the prisoner Mikkel and Heraklion on the condition of his own safe departure. Lupiz froze at the proposal and wanted to hear the opinions of her closest advisors. Ryoma understood that the good princess was already inclined to agree and was only seeking support, although good intentions could turn into misfortune. Pseudo insisted that the rebels were only carrying out the king's will, and the real culprit of all events was Godrum. Ryoma saw in these words a pitiful attempt to shift all the blame onto Godrum for the sake of saving the duke and his people. Even usually frank Meltina was silent because she was too close to the princess and feared causing her pain. Ryoma was about to speak, but Alina beat him to it. She reminded about important upcoming matters and forbade Ryoma from ruining relations with the princess due to impulsiveness. Alina advised rejecting the duke's oath, since the appearance of a second claimant to the throne would give cause for a new rebellion and plunge Rosaria into chaos. She also reminded that despite childhood closeness to Lupis, Mikkel primarily remained a general of the enemy army. Mikkel had to know the fate of the commanders of the defeated side, after which Alina coldly addressed Pseudo. Having received his confirmation, the general ordered the prisoner to be given the demand to immediately commit suicide. Pseudo was struck by the ruthlessness of the white goddess of war, while Ryoma mentally admired exactly such expected decisiveness of Alina. However, Lupis raised her head again and said something quite unexpected. She suggested that Michael could become king, and his rescue would then become the highest priority. Frightened, Meltina objected that even hypothetically discussing such a scenario was unacceptable. Realizing her own words, Lupis awkwardly called the idea foolish and asked everyone to forget it. The princess thanked Alina for the proper knightly advice, but could not dismiss doubts about one of the most reliable comrades. The loss of an unquestionably loyal knight threatened Rosaria's future, so Lupis proposed saving Michael and judging his guilt later. An agreement with the duke would also end the bloody war and reduce losses on both sides, although the princess feared her own naivety. Having heard her arguments, Ryoma confidently supported taking the duke's oath. After thanking Lupis, he put forward an important condition: Helgart had to renounce the title and pay compensation. The duke also had to be removed from court positions for several years, which was a small price for a saved life. Pseudo barely smiled, nodded, and agreed to these conditions. Later, at Lyon's headquarters, she reported to the allies that Godrum had only 2,500 knights, but continuing the battles would destroy the country's granary. Ending the war, on the other hand, would divide power and open the way for a foreign invasion, so Boltz called the situation a trap with no good way out. Despite the difficult situation, Ryoma considered the main goal achieved and declared the upcoming assault on Heraklion the final battle. In the morning, Meltina stood before Lupis and prepared to receive the order. Gathering her thoughts, the princess loudly led the army forward. One of the defenders acknowledged the situation as critical, since the decisive war had already begun. He warned about the approach of the demon, who had destroyed people in the river and was now heading straight for them. Rumors painted the Heraklion demon as a merciless monster that spared neither nobility, nor peasants, nor mothers with infants. Without wasting time, Lupis ordered all troops to march on Heraklion and bring her Godrum's head. Ryoma noticed with surprise how strongly the princess's determination inspired the soldiers. Sarah doubted whether they had done the right thing by refusing to participate in the upcoming battle. The numerical superiority of the allies allowed Lupis to capture the city without Ryoma's detachment support. After Helgart's defection, the feudal lords left the alliance, and only Godrum's loyalists and those who failed to escape remained in Heraklion. Laurie was eager to see the true face of the main enemy, but Ryoma assured that the answer would appear very soon. Entrusting the assault to the princess, the boy checked Jenu's presence. The elder confirmed the accuracy of Mikashiba's prediction, and Sarah mentally noted his exceptional knowledge. The merchant from the estate informed Jenu about a large purchase of clothing and title documents that revealed Godrum's intention to flee. Payment in gold coins further indicated the fugitive's extraordinary haste. Lyona and Boltz concluded that the doomed general was converting wealth into valuables convenient for transport. Sakuya added that Godrum also bought a considerable amount of long-lasting supplies, including pickled cucumbers. Ryoma suggested a routine military supply, but the shinobi considered such an explanation almost impossible. The boy called Godrum exactly the scoundrel Alina described, and the interested Sarah asked him to explain his conclusion. Under normal circumstances, army rations were managed by a separate supply unit. The general's personal purchase of long-lasting food meant he intended to secretly leave the country without his own troops. Alina assumed that Godrum would try to escape precisely during the assault on Heraklion, taking advantage of the battle chaos. Lyona disdainfully called him a bastard, and the general only confirmed the unchanging nature of such character and addressed Ryoma. The surprised boy asked why Alina did not accompany Lupis on the campaign. She had decided in advance not to go, because a later disappearance would have hit the morale and looked like the princess's betrayal. Instead of an open refusal, Alina feigned sudden illness. Ryoma immediately exposed the deception, but the woman shamelessly called the trick a legitimate privilege of old age. She assured that everything went well, as even Meltina with tears in her eyes tried to comfort her. Alina's influence on morale explained such a reaction, although Ryoma was more struck by the quick exposure of the situation in Heraklion. The general advised not to underestimate the veterans and gave true credit to her wonderful subordinates. Bolts narrowed the possible escape routes of Godrum to the southeast, south, southwest, and west. Inside the kingdom, there was no hideout, so Sakuya awaited an attempt to leave the country and later restore the army with the accumulated money. Alina confidently chose the western direction, forcing Ryoma to consider her arguments. Godrum's wife came from the nobility of Zaryuta, so the neighboring kingdom could give him privileges and safe refuge. Meanwhile, the general was riding in a carriage and demanded to check if a pursuit had appeared. Kyle did not notice the enemies, and the satisfied Godrum praised his advice to flee earlier than the disappearance became obvious. The received praise only strengthened Kyle's ostentatious loyalty. Even while fleeing, Godrum swore to take revenge on Lupis, Helgart, and especially Alina for the humiliation endured. Once he saved Alina's life on the promise to retire from affairs, so her return with weapons was perceived as an unbearable insult. Kyle predicted that, due to the panic around the Heraklion demon, the attackers would find an almost empty city without serious resistance. Godrum smugly decided that his own foresight supposedly could have saved Heraklion from panic. Kyle also checked whether the general's family had any difficulties on the road. He assured the best travel conditions, and Godrum ordered to protect the family as his last trump card. The general wanted to marry off his daughter to Prince Zaryuta, to seize power through the air and reward Kyle and his people with positions in the royal guards. Generous promises made the guards once again confirm their loyalty. At night, Kyle reported the continuation of the journey at dawn and advised Godrum to rest. Hearing the voice of his faithful comrade, the general offered him wine to lift his spirits. Kyle politely refused, because responsibility for safety required sobriety. Godrum enjoyed wine, river fish, and pickles, preparing soon to switch to much simpler food. Not wanting to be distracted from duties, Kyle apologized and returned to preparing for the morning departure. A sudden change in his voice alarmed Godrum, but the knight explained the tension as only a phantom noise. The next moment, the camp's peace was shattered by a guard's cry of enemy attack. Kyle warned of critical danger, and the general ordered his wife to flee immediately with him. The mountain road to Zaryuta was still free, so Kyle prepared to delay the pursuers and buy time for the family. The guards prepared to fight, and Godrum handed command to Kyle and arranged to meet in the capital of the neighboring kingdom. Leading the defense, the knight ordered the warriors to remain calm and not to use fire. All fighters with shields immediately closed ranks into a defensive line. Seeing Kyle, Lyanna confidently declared the general's head her prize. He took her blow on the shield and instantly assessed the attacker's strength. Extraordinary agility revealed not an ordinary bandit, but a truly dangerous rival. Bolts called upon the spirits of thunder to accept blood as payment and show true power. The concentrated spell released a lightning bolt, and Lyanna impatiently awaited the strike. Kyle calmly accepted the attack on the enchanted armor, whose defense completely absorbed the magic. Bolts realized that the opponent simultaneously possessed the magic of endowment and enhancement. Instead of fear, Lyanna admiringly praised the combat skill of the general, who was not going to surrender easily. Kyle disdainfully called the attackers unworthy opponents, too weak for his level. Confident in his invulnerability, he offered the miserable bandits to leave and save their lives. Ryoma appeared before him and coldly denied retreat, because this time Kyle was the one to say goodbye to life. Recognizing the fortress commander, the general froze in shock. Bolts confirmed the enemy's identity, and Kyle grimly acknowledged Mikashiba's involvement in all recent events. The encounter with the Heraklion demon frightened Kyle, but Ryoma calmly introduced himself and accepted the inevitable fight. Captured Lyanna did not lose vigilance, but Ryoma still checked if she could continue. Due to a twisted ankle, the captain was ordered to join Laura and finish off the remaining enemies without mercy. Lyanna agreed without hesitation, and bolts warned Ryoma about the simultaneous enhancement of Kyle's body and armor. One of the guards tried to convince the general to flee the danger immediately. Genu instantly killed the fighter and asked the master to entrust him with removing the remaining obstacles. Ryoma allowed the elder to take part of the fight, and he entrusted the young man to finally put an end to the civil war. Mikashiba promised to finish the matter, although even for Kyle, this adventure had already become a trap with no return. The enraged general praised the enhancement of his tower shield as a defense as strong as the very sky. He disdainfully called Ryoma's small katana a paper knife, incapable of piercing such a defense. Despite heavy armor, Kyle moved with striking speed, demonstrating the exceptional power of magical enhancement. The ancient school of fencing made him formidable in a duel, but Ryoma knew that beneath the strongest armor there was still a weak point. He recalled his grandfather's teaching about the blade as an extension of the hands and discarded everything except the single goal before him. Confident in his superiority, Kyle himself invited the opponent to attack. His plan was to block the strike with his shield and immediately launch a devastating counterattack. Not falling into the trap, Ryoma directed all his strength at a previously found weak point. The next second, a precise strike severed Kyle's arm and forced him to freeze. The stunned general saw with horror that along with the arm, the tower shield was cut in half. He could not comprehend how such a small blade overcame the steadfast defense. Ryoma used the gravity and inertia of the Earth Sword School, although without the gifted katana, this technique would not have worked. A step from the Zaryuta border, the semi-conscious Kyle bitterly acknowledged his imminent death and saw strange luck in such an end. Mikashiba named the cause of defeat as the general's excessive faith in his own strength and magic. Kyle admitted arrogance and recalled that he had previously heard a similar remark only from Mikkel. Ryoma reminded how the setup against Mikkel eventually forced random adventurers to join Lupi's. Only now did Kyle recognize the low-ranking mercenary from Princess Raiden's escort to Heraklion. The guild's forced mission and the silver hair of the companion made the squad a perfect bait for Mikkel and turned Kyle's plan into a deadly trap. The general, with a bitter laugh, admitted that he had set a trap for a mouse but caught a tiger, although Ryoma did not deny the role of his own luck. Before dying, Kyle asked for a last honor to die with the dignity of a proud knight. Showing respect to the defeated, Ryoma accepted the challenge and earned his sincere gratitude. In another part of the field, Alina fiercely broke through the guards escorting Gadram. Understanding the critical situation, the fighters urged each other to protect the general and his family at any cost. Chris saw with horror the instant death of the reinforced knight and was convinced that the legendary white goddess of war truly deserved her fame. Holding back her excitement, she reported to Alina that the plan was executed exactly as she had predicted. To end the long conflict, it remained to capture Gadram, and the general gave the main credit for the victory to Ryoma. Chris was captivated by the brilliant strategy of information leakage and complete encirclement, but Mikashiba's unfathomable talent made her question his true nature. Noticing her subordinate's fear, Alina admitted that before the operation she promised Ryoma to return alive, but she already doubted fulfilling that promise. Worried, Chris did not understand the hidden meaning and only quietly called the commander. It was then that the guard reported the capture of General Gadram Aliber. The prisoner's wife screamed in fear, and the daughter ran to her father in tears. Chris, without hesitation, ordered the women to be pulled away from the captive, whose fate was already decided. Among the attackers, Gadram recognized Alina and contemptuously called the former subordinate a miserable commoner. He mocked her aged appearance and pretended that the years of the woman's disappearance did not matter at all. Suddenly declaring surrender, the prisoner demanded a lawful trial before Lupi's and tried to shift all the blame onto Helgar. The general's shamelessness outraged the guards, although some only grimly noted the unchanging nature of his character. Alina was even calmed by such behavior, while the irritated Gadram pretended not to recognize her. The enraged Chris reminded him that Alina Steiner herself stood before him and that forgetting her was impossible. The name stunned the prisoner, but after a brief doubt, he only mocked the age of the former beauty again. Gadram recalled her former beauty and humiliatingly reproached her for the soldiers who had switched to the side of their old commander. In conclusion, he tried to reduce the respect of the common warriors for Alina to yet another dirty insult to her origin and honor. One guard had already stepped towards the prisoner, but the general stopped him and ordered Gadram to stand up. He again hid behind the capitulation and hoped to get away with a simple exile from the kingdom. Elena was boiling with rage because the noble criminal had relied from the start on a lengthy trial and the defense of his own status. Keeping a cold calm, she announced that even in captivity Godrum supposedly had not lost his honor and had himself challenged her to a duel. According to the prepared version, the general was to die as a true knight, and Chris only had to confirm exactly such a course of events. The subordinate confidently confirmed the fabricated story, and Godrum accused Elena of madness with horror. Despite the screams, the woman drew her sword and extended it to the prisoner as revenge for the life once spared to her. Overcome with fear, Godrum hurled insults and demanded respect for the law that was supposed to save him. Elena was amused by the hypocritical hope of the man who had trampled laws and subordinates all his life, and before death suddenly clung to the law. She promised to send his wife and daughter after him, and after the revenge was complete, to join all the dead herself. Chris shuddered, realizing the commander's intention to take her own life. Completely broken, Godrum began to beg for mercy, at least for his family. One precise sword stroke cut off the plea and severed the general's head. Feeling the end of years of revenge, Elena mentally addressed the deceased Celia and her husband and asked Ryoma for forgiveness for the broken promise. Chris stepped closer and carefully looked into the face of the woman, who did not take her eyes off the dead enemy. She reported the death of Godrum's wife and daughter, taking this burden entirely upon herself. The subordinate thanked Elena for her unbetrayed honor and called the family's death a consequence of Godrum's people's failed attack on the pursuers. Having listened to the explanation, the general silently nodded and added nothing more. On the other side of the kingdom, Lupis looked at the city in shock and could not believe what she saw. Meltina reported that in the almost empty Heraklion, only a few mercenaries, officials, and nobles remained. Suppressing the weak resistance was easy, so the advisor rejoiced at the quick end of the war without major losses. Lupis did not share the enthusiasm because the victory came too quickly and almost without her personal contribution. The death of General Godrum Aliberg truly ended the civil war that had torn Ridsyria apart for several months. However, instead of joy, the victory left only a bitter aftertaste in the princess. In the capital, Lupis was met by streets overflowing, with residents grateful to their future queen for ending the war. The people praised her as the warrior queen, who personally led the army into battle. The townspeople already anticipated the appointment of Meltina as captain of the royal guard and the strengthening of the state's defense. The appearance of Elena caused an explosion of admiration, as she was the one who overthrew the hated traitor Godrum. Nearby, people noticed the beautiful Chris, whom part of the crowd did not recognize immediately. When gazes shifted to Lyanna and Bolts, joy turned into anxiety over the mage's lost hand. From the sympathetic looks, Lyanna felt increasingly awkward. Some townspeople recognized the decisive role of the mercenaries, while others recounted the legend of the Heraklion monster, which destroyed 10,000 soldiers with water. New fabrications transformed the mysterious fighter into a giant and libertine, capable of killing a person with one wrong glance. Frightened residents already doubted whether it was safe to keep such a man in the queen's army. Hearing these conversations, Ryoma sighed disappointedly over the offensive fame. When people recognized the legendary monster as an ordinary 16-year-old youth, the expected image of the giant finally crumbled. Later at the Royal Council, Lupis tried to comprehend the victory and determine the next steps. Meltina called the result stunning, and the princess reminded how Ryoma involved the counts of Bergston and Elnenzel and brought back the experienced Elena. His actions cornered Godrum, maintained control over the knights, and allowed the fortress on the river to be built earlier than the enemy forces united. At Phoebus, Ryoma flooded the superior army, thwarted the general's escape, helped capture Heraklion, and personally got rid of Kyle. Lupis could only acknowledge the incredible scale of these achievements. Meltina added that the freely reinforced army defeated 20,000 enemies, and the heads of 2 generals made Makazaba's contribution unprecedented. Alan noted that rumors about the youth were already spreading respect and fear throughout the country, even if the hero himself did not like such fame. The image of the Heraklion demon could strengthen the crown's power, but at the same time turned Ryoma into a desirable prey for many rulers. He fulfilled the promise to bring victory, and the crown-hired guild cleared his name and restored his freedom. It was not possible to prove Vals's involvement, although the guild master was detained for profiteering in the post-war chaos, and he likely had to leave the country. The council moved on to rewarding Mikazaba, and agreed that the ordinary position of squad commander did not at all correspond to his merits. A higher award could provoke resistance from the nobility and commoners, and Mikhail, due to house arrest, could not suppress the discontent. Alan pondered the vacant position of Minister of Defense and the influence of the rootless appointee on the distribution of other state positions. An additional problem remained the personal oath of Ryoma to the queen without obligations to the state, which made it extremely difficult to keep him. Lupis shook her head, as she did not even believe in the possibility of full control over him. Mikazaba had already used power and charisma to create his own small army of mercenaries and assassins. His presence brought great benefit, but in the event of a coup, the crown had no power to stop him. Maltina rejected the very possibility of betrayal, but Alan warned that the future can change any person. After hesitation, the advisor suggested that the murder of Mikazaba could be handled by someone close to him. Lupis immediately objected, although Maltina insisted on Ryoma's trust in the potential executor. The princess feared that the woman would side with Mikazaba and give the crown two powerful enemies and a new catastrophic war. The gloomy Alan admitted that with such a risk, there really was no simple way out. The conversation was interrupted by a maid who announced the arrival of an unfamiliar man named Pseudo to Lupis. By Maltina's order, the guest was admitted to the hall, where he respectfully greeted the queen. Seeing the insolent intermediary for the second time, the advisor could not contain her indignation. Pseudo feigned misunderstanding and called the sincere congratulations on the coronation the sole purpose of his visit. He reminded of the promises made on the battlefield and asked for greater trust, but the irritated Maltina sharply cut off the speech. The attentive guest noticed the hidden anxiety and warned that excessive worries could show on the face. Pseudo immediately named Ryoma Mikashiba as the source of unrest, and Alan mentally noted the impeccable precision of the provocation. After meeting the young man, the crown found itself in a trap. He could not be made an ordinary knight, released from the country, or simply destroyed. Maltina demanded more careful word choice, and Lupis quietly urged her to restrain herself. The queen understood that Pseudo came with a ready plan, so she allowed the proposal to be presented. Pleased with Lupis's insight, the guest flatteringly predicted the country's prosperity under her rule. Ryoma's existence created an undeniable problem, but hasty measures could only worsen the situation. Pseudo proposed to keep him in the kingdom with a high reward, but not to grant knightly service or an influential position at court. Within the state, only one remote land met all these conditions. Weighing the arguments, Lupis officially bestowed the title of Baron on Ryoma Mikazabai on behalf of Ridsyria. From now on, the young man was to rule the distant Wertinia Peninsula alone. The elevation of the mercenary to nobility stunned everyone, and the ill reputation of the unusual possession only intensified doubts. Lupis explained the reward by military merits and loyalty that exceeded any expectations from a citizen of Ridsyria. Acknowledging Ryoma's invaluable contribution, the queen apologized for the long decision and asked him to accept the well-deserved reward. The court still considered the young man dangerous, but for now the kingdom successfully kept him in a golden cage. Left alone with his thoughts, Ryoma realized how masterfully the queen had outplayed him. To the surprised Liana, he compared his exile to the fate of Liu Bang in Bashu, although the situation was still better than the misfortune of Hanzin. Interested, Liana asked for details of the historical comparison, but Ryoma advised not to delve into it. The captain saw the transformation of the mercenary into a nobleman as a great success, while Boltz doubted the right to refuse and the possibility of survival in the notorious lands. Retreat would have cut off Ryoma's access to guild tasks and destroyed everything he had achieved after escaping from Ultomia. The young man also did not want to lose face by a hasty refusal, and Alina thanked him and reminded him of her own promise. Sarah screamed in surprise, while Laura became nervous due to the sudden strangeness of their behavior. Ryoma explained that after the war Alina promised him a duel, and the argument about horses only reminded him of his inability to ride. The general advised the new nobleman to learn to stay in the saddle, but he instead asked her to take care of him in case of defeat. After a brief preparation, they began the duel. Recognizing Mikashiba's fiery stance, Alina suddenly announced a change of decision. Ryoma reminded her of the promise, but the woman wavered, brushed off the help, and admitted defeat herself. The exhausted general confessed that the duel was only a trick meant to test his ability to stop her reckless act. Alina reproached the young man for indifference to elders, but a compliment to her youth changed irritation into laughter, and a conversation about his 16 years. Suddenly pushing Ryoma, the woman assured that everything was fine and asked for just one short moment. Laura anxiously urged Alina not to rush and to calm down. Ignoring the warning, the general revealed her dream to hold her own child in her arms and show her a protected world. Ryoma noted that he was no longer a small child, then quietly apologized, leaving Alina confused. The next moment, he easily lifted the stunned woman and placed her on his shoulders. The boy wanted to fulfill the same dream of his parents, and Alina finally acknowledged his strength. Agreeing with her own defeat, she warned about the upcoming obstacles of the new lands, but assured her unconditional faith in him. Calling Ryoma her son, Alina gently ordered him to move forward, and he calmly accepted her guidance. In Japan, Kusuda again reproached Takabani that visiting an empty house only wasted their efforts. The steadfast partner ordered to silently follow and return here until the search yielded results. Kusuda doubted the missing youth's connection to the case, as the family fully cooperated during interrogations. Takabana could not accept the disappearance without a trace, as if after being transported to another world, and demanded to restart the investigation. Meanwhile, the Vortinia Peninsula formerly belonged to Ridsyria, but in fact served as a place of exile for criminals. There was almost no civilian population there, and wild lands were freely roamed by monsters and half-demons, while pirates plundered the coast. Having surveyed the area, Shardana satisfactorily noted the successful elimination of opponents. Saito agreed that alive these people could have caused them serious problems. The princess pondered how exactly the enemies got involved in the Ridsyria civil war. She saw no benefit from such interference and recalled the assassin Gaius Valkland, but Pseudo suggested to reconstruct the events from the very beginning. Gaius's plan was to pit Maist, Ridsyria, and Zaryuta against each other, exhaust the three weak kingdoms, and open them up for an easy invasion by Ultomia. The absorption of these lands would preserve the balance with the northern and western neighbors and become the empire's only path to world conquest. The grim Saito admitted that one man killed Gaius and ruined the entire original plan. Pseudo, with a slight smile, noticed how much the compatriot hated Ryoma. He advised not to be upset, as he himself had almost lost the puppet into whose cultivation he had invested much time and effort. Shardana recalled that the poisoning of the previous king of Ridsyria and the struggle for the throne had taken place according to their plan without any suspicion. That is why Ryoma's voluntary consent to the formal promotion, which was actually exile to Vortinia, surprised the princess. Pseudo called the young man extremely interesting and reminded about the additional conditions he had put forward at the last moment. In response to the lavish reward, Ryoma promised to develop new lands, and for this, he calmly requested 1,000,000 gold coins from the crown. Even Saito could not suppress a smile at such audacity. Shardana called the demand absurd and compared it to the entire income of Ridsyria, which was almost impossible to collect. Pseudo explained the negotiation trick. First, the opponent was stunned by an unthinkable price, and then a real concession was achieved. In the end, Ryoma received full power over the laws, the army, foreign policy, and the economy of Vortinia, exemption from taxes, and 5,000 gold for development. Saito equated the investment to almost 500 million yen, and Pseudo's silent nod confirmed Lupiz's agreement to the stunned Shardana. Together with the title of Baron, these conditions gave Mikazubai the power of a duke and effectively turned Vortinia into an independent principality. Ryoma skillfully used Lupiz's guilt after the first refusal, but Pseudo saw a new opportunity in the good queen's inability to engage in cunning political games. Shardana called the decision foolish and feared that the man endowed with great power would one day bite them like a poisonous snake. Pseudo reminded of the barren wild land without taxes, where even all of Ryoma's talents could not yield quick results. The threat of Vortinia restrained Ridsyria from helping Zaryuta, so Ultomia received a great opportunity to start the planned invasion. Meanwhile, Alina's subordinate cautiously asked if the general was worried about Mikazubai's fate. Chris reminded that in half a month Ryoma was already supposed to reach the fortress of Iplost's gateway to Vortinia. Alina did not hide her bitterness, but respected the queen's decision, and from now on could only protect the ruler and the peace of the country. The subordinate cautiously recalled rumors about Lupiz's intention to cancel Mikkel's house arrest. The general confirmed the queen's alarm due to the absence of a completely reliable ally and immediately stopped the dangerous topic. At the Raiden court, they were drawn into the royal family's affairs, and Helgart was demoted from duke to viscount. Formally, all problems were resolved, but Alina felt that the situation was not improving, but getting worse. Chris assumed that after meeting, Vortinia Makazaba would hate them and become a new enemy of the crown. Alina smiled and promised to personally destroy him in case of a real threat, which only confirmed her unchanging nature. Despite her outward confidence, she still hoped that the next meeting with the named son would not be so gloomy. Meanwhile, Ryoma sneezed in the saddle, and the worried Liona advised holding out until Iplos beyond the mountain ridge. Instead of a cold, the young man angrily complained about pain from the long horseback ride. Liona immediately struck the new baron for his unworthy words and threatened disgrace to the specially created family coat of arms. Laura explained that the sword on the emblem meant strength, and the snake cunning and knowledge, so the owner had to behave with dignity. Ryoma reluctantly agreed, and Liona was surprised at how seriously the twin sister took his new status. Laura suggested in the tavern to rub ointment on his back, but Sarah's jealous outrage only deepened Leona's despair at this frivolity. Boltz advised switching to the carriage, but the Baron did not want to show weakness before the Crimson Lion's fighters in the wild lands. The closest to Vortinia, Iplos, was supposed to give them rest, information, and supplies, and Sarah was most delighted at the chance to finally take a bath. Seeing the huge fortifications of the border city, Ryoma did not hide his admiration for their strength. The walls protected not only from Zaryuda, but also from the peninsula's monsters, which is why Iplos was nicknamed the lid of the infernal cauldron. Already behind the walls, Ryoma sat at the table and focused on the future of the new possession. Managing the wild land with a detachment of only 30 people, along with the entire Crimson Lion, seemed like suicide. Laura suggested recalling the mercenaries disbanded after the war, but the young man wanted to keep some allies on the mainland. Besides warriors, he needed reconnaissance of the lands, equipment, food routes, and people with knowledge for real development. The twins set out to find merchants ready to cooperate at the market, receiving orders to select candidates very carefully. Boltz went to the guild for information about Vortinia, and Jenu was to gather data about families, characters, preferences, and weaknesses of all influential townspeople. The elder understood the need to secure the support of the powerful and promised to exceed the lord's expectations. Liona wanted to find protection for the future ruler, so Ryoma entrusted recruiting 200 of the best fighters for only 1 year. Each recruit received a chance to become a full-fledged knight, although initially the possession had no income for the long-term maintenance of the army. For himself, Ryoma chose the most difficult task to try to arrange a meeting with the governor of Iplos, Count Salzburg. Future cooperation required immediately outlining the position, even if the count would refuse to accept the young neighbor at all. A nobleman lower in rank could not pass through the city without a respectful greeting, and Liona again called nobility a complete headache. Jenu soberly noted that the reliability of the count could only be assessed during a personal meeting. Agreeing, Ryoma allowed everyone to rest briefly and reminded them of the importance of future tasks. Sarah, Laura, and Liona went on errands, and the master made sure that Jenu stayed nearby and listened. After long mutual tests, the young man directly demanded an explanation of the true reason for the elders joining. It was time to end the hidden game, because Ryoma already had a specific order for the entire Igasaki clan. Jenu correctly guessed about the murder of an important person, and the master asked to name the price. Instead of money, the elder offered to fulfill a request in exchange for a future service. Interested Ryoma accepted the exchange and moved on to discuss the details. Jenu mentally marveled at the audacity of the young man who had already managed to achieve so much. In Japan, Ryoma's grandfather, meanwhile, was talking with detectives Kusuda and Takabana. Asuka waited on the side and hoped for new information, since more than half a year had passed since the friend's disappearance. The old man pulled her from her thoughts and politely asked to escort the policeman to the exit. The girl agreed, and Takabana apologized for the interrupted training and thanked the host for the cooperation. On the way, Kusuda silently assessed the attractiveness of his young guide. He also doubted the old man's normality, although the host's irritation suggested stopping the fruitless interrogations. The absence of an obvious crime complicated the work, but Takabana stubbornly did not believe in the simplicity of the missing boy's grandfather. Kusuda explained the unnatural impression only by the excessive calm of a person who had lost a grandson. The partner objected, because the old man caused in him the same feeling as the murderer once met in Hong Kong. Kusuda was tired of the familiar story. Takabana called him a frivolous fool and Asuka awkwardly apologized for interfering in the dispute. Left alone, the old man returned to the day of the disappearance of his son and daughter-in-law and recalled the last request to take care of Ryoma. Suddenly, both his katanas began to tremble strangely. The old man was stunned by the feeling, as if the blades were truly crying. A terrible premonition intensified when he could no longer feel the presence of Asuka and the policeman. A familiar vibration reminded him of the moment when he himself was once torn to another world. The mind rejected the impossible, but instinct suggested that now this world was taking Asuka. Once the old man fought there with all his might, and only miraculously returned home at the cost of countless sacrifices. He found no combat comrades anymore, for all had forever remained in another world or vanished without a trace. After decades, the son and his wife disappeared, and now the old man finally understood that Ryoma did not run away, but was also transferred. The same threat already hung over Asuka. After losing his son, the old man taught his grandson all martial arts precisely for survival, in case of an inevitable summons. The ordinary Asuka did not have such training, so powerless before fate, the old man vowed to protect her at any cost. The girl, Kusuda, and Takabana had already found themselves in another world, without even realizing the transfer. Asuka tensely surveyed the unfamiliar room and tried to comprehend the new situation. The woman before them greeted the strangers with deliberately polite hospitality, as if with the sincerest welcome. She especially emphasized the warmth of the reception, creating a deceptive impression of friendliness. Light hair, pale skin, and strange clothing revealed the foreigner, but Asuka was even more impressed by the complete mutual understanding. Takabana immediately took out his police ID and showed it to those present. Introducing himself as a Japanese policeman, he checked whether the woman understood the Japanese language. Receiving no answer, the detective switched to English and firmly demanded the names of the hosts and their location. The sullen Kusuda unsuccessfully tried to understand who these strangers were and what was happening. The woman carefully examined the trio and determined that the language setting was completed only for the girl. The men did not yet understand the local language, but their strong bodies made them suitable combat puppets. Kusuda heard only meaningless sounds, and at the same time realized that they were standing at the entrance to a completely unfamiliar house. The irritated detective again flashed his badge and demanded an answer, forcing the surrounding knights to prepare their weapons. He ordered the blades to be lowered and assumed a theatrical pose, but the frightened Asuka warned of real danger. What she heard made Kusuda ask the girl again in confusion. The knights instantly rushed forward and grabbed both detectives, and Asuka screamed in horror. The mistress called the men mediocre, but after the connection ended, she appointed the insightful girl as the servant of her lord. Even in captivity, Takabana fiercely forbade anyone to touch Asuka. The woman assured that the generous and kind ruler would supposedly treat the new slave well. However, the promise lasted only until the interest in the next toy was lost, and the girl was pierced by icy fear. Raising her hand, the sorceress called upon the god of light to fulfill the ancient pact and bind Asuka's soul to this world. She disdainfully called the future cursed brand a trifle that would cause only minor pain. Without waiting for help, Asuka desperately called Ryoma. It was then that before the sorceress appeared an old man who coldly forbade with dirty hands to touch his granddaughter. The stunned girl recognized the old man, and he first checked whether she had been wounded. The knights instantly tensed and demanded the stranger to identify himself. In response, the man mocked their inability to assess the opponent and their overly open stances. The lightning-fast attack left the knights no chance. By the emblem, the old man recognized the kingdom of Verzibia and relievedly dismissed any involvement of Elnester or the cult of the god of light. Asuka froze because her grandfather had just killed people without hesitation. The enraged sorceress could not forgive the death of her right hand by the weapon of a marionette summoned from another world. She threatened to cut the attacker apart and feed him to the pigs, but the old man calmly ended her life. He called empty threats the reason for the woman's death, who was supposed to either cast spells or attack immediately. The stunned Asuka, stammering, finally asked to explain the events. Nearby, Takabana continued to fight the knight and tried to break him with a triangular leg hold. The grandfather recognized with interest the technique of old judo, now more often called Kozen judo. At the same time, he warned that such a technique would not work against an opponent clad in armor. Finally, the old man revealed the main point to Asuka. They were not in Japan and not even on their home planet. Tachibana was stunned to hear confirmation of the transfer, which was most likely caused by the recently killed sorceress. Kusuda understood nothing, and his partner was already demanding an explanation for the summons to a foreign world. The old man called the event an accident and informed them that they found themselves in the southern kingdom of Verzibia on the western continent. The sole purpose of the summoning was slavery, and Kusuda perceived this truth as a real hellish nightmare. Despite his own confusion, Tachibana tried to stop his partner's panic. He acknowledged the horror of the situation, but named their main task as a joint escape from this place. The old man pointed the way north to the capital Helnestula, if the group could even manage to get there alive. Tachibana's suspicions about his knowledge were cut off by a foreign breath from the left corridor, which the old man sensed before anyone else. Frightened Asuka immediately asked if they should turn back. Instead of retreating, the old man ordered his granddaughter to take Alka with her. The unfamiliar name belonged to a katana from a paired set with Kikuku, thanks to which the separated owners were to find each other again. The old man ordered everyone to leave the castle and leave the pursuers to him, but Asuka refused to abandon her grandfather alone. Kusuda forcibly pulled her by the hand, and Tachibana admitted that extra people would only get in the way and asked to survive until the next meeting. The grandfather entrusted them with Asuka's protection and ordered them to move forward at any cost. Leaving the old man, the girls swore that they would definitely survive. In Iplos, respectfully bowed maidservants greeted the long-awaited Baron Mikashiba. Count Salzburg personally came out to the guest, and with a broad smile thanked him for the visit. Ryoma responded with deep gratitude for the reception and expressed hope that youth and inexperience would not hinder future cooperation. The Count's wife suggested resting after the long journey, as beyond Iplos to the very peninsula there were no more towns or villages. Salzburg reminded that before restoring order in Wertinia, the Baron would have to replenish supplies right here. The new neighborhood required getting to know each other better and laying a strong foundation for relations. Ryoma asked permission to learn from the experienced Count, and he confirmed that he had indeed been preparing for his arrival. For the guests' sake, the host ordered the best cook to prepare the most exquisite dishes. Seeing the luxurious banquet, the young man called it an excessive honor for a person of modest origin. Salzburg only laughed and advised the favorite of the queen herself to discard unnecessary modesty. The wife gently interrupted the long conversation, reproaching her husband for the food that was cooling before the guests. The Count admitted his mistake, apologized, and ordered the servants to fill the Baron's glass. The maid silently poured the drink, and Ryoma thanked her with a slight nod. The host solemnly raised a glass to his own family and Lord Mikazubu. Later in his room, Ryoma concluded that the Count and his wife gave the impression of decent and sincere people. Their behavior did not reveal deceit, but the variety of dishes and the large amount of spices seemed unusual. The young man doubted that taxes from one estate could pay for such ostentatious wealth. The local cook surpassed the capital masters, and the thought of special supplies suddenly led Ryoma to question the salt. The reflections were interrupted by the quiet voice of the maid behind the door, who asked the Baron for permission to enter. The girl cautiously entered and apologized for the intrusion, and the wary Ryoma asked about the master's order. She shook her head and confessed that the Countess had ordered her to spend the night with the guests. Learning about his wife's decision, Salzburg became angry, as he had long been eyeing this maid and did not want to give her to the upstart. The Countess reminded him of the many other girls whom the man threw away after a brief amusement anyway. Hitting the table with his fist, the master called the maids his property and refused to voluntarily share even an unnecessary thing. Having somewhat composed himself, he admitted that the young upstart had to somehow justify the attention given to him. The wife wanted to draw the Baron into their circle through shared entertainments and gradually gain his trust. Looking at the trembling girl, Ryoma cautiously asked if she would suffer because of his refusal to play this game. Holding back tears, the maid assured that she was ready for anything for the satisfaction of the masters. She begged to be allowed to fulfill her duty, as returning without results could end with terrible consequences for her. Ryoma realized that the girl sent back could really have been simply thrown out of the house. Her conviction revealed the cruelty of the outwardly gentle and beautiful mistress. The maid was still trembling, but timidly promised to make every effort. Instead of demanding obedience, Ryoma approached, took a blanket, and covered the stunned girl with it. He asked her not to look so doomed, and allowed her to safely stay in the room until morning. The next day, Mike critically examined the Baron's appearance and shook his head disapprovingly. Mike reminded that the assignment lasted until returning home, so the Baron had to politely say goodbye and not forget to smile. Taking a deep breath, Ryoma announced the departure in a steady voice and earned a restrained nod from the master. With official politeness, he thanked for the hospitality and expressed eagerness for future cooperation with Salzburg. The Count smiled broadly and promised full security for the development of Wartenia under his own patronage. As soon as the guest left the estate, the master cursed the lack of useful information and doubted the young man's real connection with the queen. The wife advised to wait, later return the maid, and only watch to ensure that the helpless Baron would not make mistakes without their help. Already near the carriage, Mike joked that the unusual manners were tiring, but Ryoma apparently received a fun nighttime reward. To the indignant question, he referred to intuition, because of which Bolts sent him to accompany the Baron. Mike supposedly demanded praise and was delighted with the separate bedroom, wonderful food, and drinks at the estate. Ryoma received the same reception, but the excessive hospitality made the companion so wary that he could not fall asleep. Both saw the hidden motives of the hosts, but considered the personal visit appropriate, and were now looking for the reason behind the ostentatious generosity. The young nobleman, humiliated by exile, did not need appeasement, so the Count most likely just wanted to get him out of sight faster. Mike agreed that Salzburg tried not to leave the guest any doubts about the immediate departure to Wartenia. Ryoma briefly suspected a Lupi's trap, but the Count was not involved in the war and justified neutrality by defending the border. The lack of information did not allow a final conclusion, so the Baron decided to wait for reports from the rest of the people. Mike promised to report on the amazing reception, and especially the past night, but immediately called it a joke. Seeing Ryoma's heavy sigh, he assured that he would not tell anything even to the twins. The Baron was not amused at all, because he considered the angry Laura and Sarah truly frightening. Mike hinted that the young man, too, easily dismissed the feelings of the girls, although he was fully aware of them. After a brief hesitation, Ryoma reluctantly admitted the truth of the remark. The companion suggested that thoughts about the native world did not allow for a reciprocal response, while he himself never had a place to return to. Ryoma soberly accepted reality and admitted that he had long understood the impossibility of returning home. Watching his face, Mike again thought about the strange nature of this man. The fearful calm did not make the Baron heartless, for even now he was worried that he was dragging everyone into dangerous affairs. Mike suddenly thanked for the chance to become a knight, which ordinary life would never have given him. He assured the absence of regret from the entire squad and asked Ryoma to continue doing what he considered right. The seriousness quickly changed to a request for several bottles of good alcohol in exchange for silence about the previous night. Laughing, the Baron allowed Mike to drink as much as he wanted. The satisfied mercenary acknowledged his attempt as completely successful. Ryoma felt the relentless movement of life, decided to move forward, and after returning met Laura and Sarah. He immediately asked for a report on the trading companies, and the twins confirmed the availability of information. Almost all merchants of Iplos maintained close ties with Count Salzburg and depended on him. The 10 largest companies formed an alliance that completely controlled the city's economy and did not allow new competitors. The union arose thanks to Countess Julia Salzburg, the only daughter of the head of the trading company Mistor. Ryoma swore because the Count's full control over supply made the next stage of development impossible. Bolts linked the power of the union to the daughter of its leader, and Lyon was surprised by the marriage of a nobleman to a merchant heiress. Money could buy the family a path to the upper world, but the status of a lawful wife instead of a mistress made the deal especially suspicious. Rumor had it that Salzburg once had serious financial difficulties, and merchants could lure him with rescue investments. Ryoma assumed that it was military expenses that forced the proud nobleman to accept the money. A significant part of the budget went to the border and monsters, and once every 10 years, a major attack forced all northern houses to raise troops. The constant threat was equivalent to a real war, explained the region's non-participation in the rebellion, and at the same time created serious supply problems. Despite large expenses, the Count did not seem poor, so Ryoma shifted the conversation to possible control over salt mining. Genu denied the existence of any salt mines within the county. The absence of deposits meant a hidden but extremely stable supply channel. Sarah assumed that the source of salt was located beyond the borders of the possessions, already on the Vortinia Peninsula. Almost everyone simultaneously recognized this version as the most probable. The smiling Jenu praised the speed of the conclusions and confirmed the secret salt extraction on the lands of Ryoma. Liona was stunned and called it a grave crime, for the disclosure of which the Count and the entire family could face execution. While Sakuya was amazed at the greed, the elder pointed on the map to the mines on the Vortinian side of the mountains, which Ephilos had previously used secretly. Ryoma finally understood the warm reception. The satisfied Baron was supposed to pass by and never notice the hidden salt well. Laura understood the invisibility of the mines behind the dark mountain slope, and Jenu suggested killing the Count and transferring the rights to the salt to Ryoma. Sarah sharply objected, because such a swift reprisal would bring them defeat in the long run. The surprised elder asked for an explanation, while Sakuya and Liona did not at all expect protection from murder from the militant girl. The development of Vortinia required the preservation of Ephilos, and after the Count's death, the Queen could simply appoint a completely loyal governor. The disclosure of the salt deposit would attract other states and cause a war that the weak possession would not survive. Jenu admitted the plan was hasty, and Ryoma reminded about the lack of trade routes, which made the capture of the mines pointless. Sakuya predicted a boycott of the Count-dependent alliance, so Laura proposed to allow Salzburg to mine salt on their land for now. The Baron had to pretend that hospitality had dulled his vigilance and give up the rights to the mines in exchange for help in developing Vortinia. Financial support would accelerate development, and later, at the right opportunity, the lands could be returned without the Queen's intervention. Ryoma recognized the proposal as reasonable and agreed to play one more act for the sake of the goal. Both supported the plan, but demanded to find a reliable merchant so that the Count would never remain the sole source of food. The only possible partner was the trading company Christoph, brought to decline by the alliance with Mistor. Ryoma, together with Laura and Sarah, set off to her office. On the spot, the Baron immediately noticed an unusual emptiness for a trading company. Laura explained the desolation by the economic isolation imposed by the Mistor company. The guests were met by Simonetta Christoph, who bowed elegantly and introduced herself as the temporary head of the family business. Her manners and appearance reminded Ryoma of a beautiful lily with hidden danger inside. With a mysterious smile, Simonetta informed that she had already heard the name of the new Baron. Ryoma suspected another mention of a demon, but the reason for the awareness turned out to be much more serious. About a year ago, Kupchinya saw the same name in the list of registered adventurers of the Ultomian Empire. The record confirmed that 8 months ago Ryoma Mikashiba joined the Ultomian Guild. After a thorough study of the past, Simonetta still doubted the correctness of the conclusions about his identity. At the demand for explanations, she named the guest as the ruler of Vortinia, whose biography she had already researched as deeply as she could. Even a detailed search left gaps in his past, which especially troubled Kupchinya. The oldest evidence of Ryoma's existence was only an 8-month-old guild record, which was completely insufficient for a full history of the nobleman. The company's extensive network of informants usually found even those details that were inaccessible by their own means. The young man mentally acknowledged the extraordinary insight and brilliant analytical abilities of his interlocutor. Her people could uncover even the secret of an illegitimate royal child, yet Mikashiba's origin remained a complete mystery. Ryoma briefly considered eliminating the dangerous woman, but after assessing the circumstances, he rejected murder. Simonetta linked Lupiz's unheard-of ingenuity in victory with rare skills that hinted at the unusual origin of the commander. She directly identified Ryoma as an alien from another world, forcibly summoned to Ultimia. Instead of denial, the young man acknowledged the exceptional efficiency of her information network. The merchant woman noticed the lack of resistance, and Ryoma, through her awareness, confirmed the futility of further play. Simonetta explained her own frankness by complete trust in the informants. She also assured that she did not at all intend to become the enemy of the new Baron. The vigilant Ryoma felt strong hostility from the neighboring room and hinted at a hidden person there. The hostess, without surprise, named the source of the deadly aura as her closest ally and protector. Natural cruelty had saved her life more than once, and the sincerity of the explanation allowed her to return to the more important matter. Ryoma showed understanding of the merchant woman's true intentions and readiness to respond in kind. Simonetta accepted his reaction as permission to continue the negotiations. The Baron suggested moving on to practical matters while praising the pleasant taste of the served tea. He did not consider himself an expert, although he often heard family conversations about tea, and Laura sincerely admired the rich beverage. For brewing, they used the best leaves of Christinia, which the Christoph Company was especially proud of. Ryamu was surprised by the delivery of goods from the state in the western part of the continent. Simonetta explained the route through the western port and then by the southern sea route to Iplos. An inconvenient choice of road reminded the Baron of the special problems of the Vortinian Peninsula. Along its entire coast, there was no supply port, which corresponded to the almost complete absence of a permanent population. Because of pirates, sailors avoided the northern route, but a safe port in Vortinia would open up entirely new opportunities. Simonetta enthusiastically supported the idea, as the northern route through the peninsula promised huge profits and trade with other continents. A monopoly on sea transportation could turn the useless Vortinia into a source of colossal income. Ryoma understood that the conversation was a mutual test of intentions, and Simonetta smiled, acknowledging the shared goal of their actions. Agreeing, he suggested dropping the overly official title and addressing him by his first name. The merchant woman did not allow herself such freedom, but agreed to call him Mr. Mikazuba in private conversations. Later, Genu recognized the Christoph Company's knowledge as extraordinary and imagined serious consequences of its possible alliance with enemies. The company cooperated with merchants inside the country and abroad through carrier pigeons, and old connections retained their value even after decline. Ryoma ordered Genu to avoid bloodshed during direct dealings with merchants who disliked such methods. The elder assured that espionage was the clan's true specialization and allowed supporting the lord from the shadows. After thanking, the Baron forbade starting negotiations with the Christophs for now, so as not to provoke the Count prematurely. Simonetta had already revealed her intentions, so it was safer to first negotiate with companies that supported Salzburg. Boltz reminded of an even bigger problem. Without population, even acquired materials would not turn into villages and a real state. Ryoma wanted to give people the opportunity to earn, and only then collect taxes, for which the authority was supposed to exist. Sari considered such a plan a path to thievery, but Laura reminded about the ruler's responsibility for the happiness of subjects. People were the most important resource, but forced resettlement from Iplos or foreign states equaled theft of another lord's property. Therefore, the Baron began looking for another way to attract residents. Laura proposed an expensive option that would increase the population without angering neighboring rulers. The possibility of a peaceful solution immediately interested Ryoma. The twins hinted that a good master would never choose such a method himself, and the perplexed young man demanded to reveal the hidden thought. Laura finally suggested solving the shortage of people by buying slaves. In the dark alleys of Iplos, there were plenty of slave traders ready to provide the necessary workforce for money. Genu acknowledged the cheapness of ordinary working slaves as an advantage, although he doubted their future loyalty. Sakuya added that such a purchase would not cause dissatisfaction among other countries and lords. Liana even offered credit, since the hero of the Civil War and the new Baron seemed a reliable debtor. Ryamu was outraged by the very idea of buying people, especially with borrowed funds. Laura reminded that after the deal he could himself grant freedom to the purchased slaves. The absence of a strict contract with former slaves seemed possible to Liana, but Sakuya warned about the risk of rebellion. Sarah gave her own example. After being freed from battle slavery, both sisters voluntarily devoted their lives to Ryamu. Liana understood that the twins hoped to earn the same loyalty from other saved people. Boltz sharply objected, because most slaves could betray at the first opportunity. Born into extreme poverty, slaves were often ready to do anything just to survive. At the same time, the example of Laura and Sarah did not allow completely dismissing the possibility of sincere gratitude for freedom. Sarah called her own devotion obvious, and Laura involuntarily confessed love for the master and immediately became embarrassed. Bolt saw the solution precisely in the ability to convince slaves of the value of Ryoma's service and gradually build mutual trust. Despite all arguments, the young man hated slavery for its complete disregard of human will and the disgusting division into classes. However, the possibility of saving slaves in Vortinia and at the same time developing the country justified the painful compromise. Thanking Boltz, Ryoma decided to soon visit the slave traders together with Laura and Sarah. The girls accepted the order, and the Baron himself felt as if he was using the feelings of those around him, although he saw no other way out. Laura understood that the master did not even notice his own difference from the world, where slaves were not considered people at all. Ryoma did not draw any boundary between them, and that was why she was ready to stay with him forever. The slave trader gladly invited the guests inside and offered to inspect all the available goods. He praised Abdul's company as having the largest selection of slaves in all of Iplos. Without wasting time, Ryoma reported the need for a large number of people. The merchant clarified the scale of the order and warned about the limited stock of war slaves. The provided list required about 300 people from teenage to middle age, with an equal number of men and women. Even the largest seller in the city found it difficult to gather such a large batch alone. The Baron ordered to involve other slave traders and fulfill the order jointly. The seller called teenagers too weak for hard labor and suggested adult men instead. He also inquired about the purpose of the slaves, but Ryoma refused to explain his own affairs. Watching the trade, Laura realized how lucky she and Sarah were to avoid separation, which most captives could not prevent. Noticing the seller's hesitation, Ryoma turned around and pretended to intend to leave. The fear of losing a huge deal forced the slave trader to immediately invite the guests further to inspect the working slaves. What they saw inside stunned Ryoma and both twins. Meanwhile, Asuka rushed to the wounded Takabana, and Kusuda urged her on due to the rapid deterioration of his condition. Severe bleeding left no time, so the girl feverishly assessed the age of the wound and the possibility of rescue. Asuka suddenly stopped for immediate help, although Kusuda reminded her of the danger of the foreign world and the lack of necessary means. Despite objections, she refused to run further, not giving the wounded even a short rest. Kusuda acknowledged her correctness, apologized for the haste, and went to look for water and food, ordering to stay alert. The only wooden stick did not add confidence, but circumstances forced the detective to entrust Takabana to Asuka and go himself. Suddenly Alka vibrated as if it sang, and the girl shuddered from surprise. Takabana began to regain consciousness, while the confused Asuka drew his attention to the strange behavior of the katana. The next moment, a monster appeared before them. In Iplos, the slave trader meanwhile continued babbling, not noticing the increasingly gloomy mood of the buyer. He suggested breeding slaves, but called the matter unprofitable due to the long maturation of children and low future productivity. The seller contemptuously assured that nothing valuable should be expected from the lower class at all. The most profitable method he considered was to get rid of exhausted workers and simply buy new ones. From these words, Ryoma exploded with rage, grabbed the merchant by the clothes, and was already ready to use force. Laura and Sarah instantly intervened and stopped the master from an irreparable act. Understanding his anger, Laura begged him to control himself before the situation completely got out of hand. The merchant, scared to death, realized his own mistake and began stammering, begging for mercy. He decided that he had offended the Baron's beloved companions, so he showered Ryoma with repentance for the sake of salvation. Mikashiba sharply ordered to raise his head and give a clear answer regarding the supply of 300 slaves. The trembling seller swore by his life to fulfill the nobleman's order without any failure. Satisfied, Ryoma moved on to the total cost, although the price depended on the age and gender of each person. Noticing new hesitation, the Baron sternly demanded to name a specific amount. The merchant estimated the batch at approximately 150 gold coins, that is about 50,000 yen per person. Ryoma accepted the terms but agreed to pay only half immediately, and the rest after receiving all the slaves. Reflecting on the deal, he realized that he had encountered the dark side not only of Iplos, but of the entire New World. The cautious voice of Laura brought the Baron back to reality, and he hastily apologized for his aloofness.